Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, AI community without borders. Wherever you are, dear AI enthusiasts around the world, welcome to the largest cross-industry global leading AI event in December. Please let me know in the chat where you are joining us from today. I'm getting quite emotional thinking that this is our last event this year. Time passed so fast again. And we are looking back to an exceptional time with ups and downs. A big thank you to all of you for your trust, your engagement and collaboration. Whenever I'm standing in front of you, my dear audience, I'm feeling full of positive energy. Thank you for being with us and being with us through this whole year. Our topic today is about the AI trajectory 2022 and beyond. And it is hard to anticipate the future. Maybe it is not even possible unless we sit around and do nothing, or we take responsibility to influence it to our best advantage. The challenges that we face today, we cannot solve alone. The solution lies in joint forces across industries, organizations, disciplines, governments, the private and public sector, continents, and societies with their various cultures. And even if we join forces, it is unlikely that we will see immediate results. We are on a longer journey where the impact of our work today will be likely perceptible mainly by the young and coming generations. That means what we do today, we do it for our children and the children of tomorrow. Also, the potentials of AI applications are not based on plug and play. It is a process with many contributing factors playing a crucial role in their undermining or underpinning success. These factors include anything from the human to technological aspects, such as skilled workforce, leadership, data accessibility and quality, infrastructure, and regulations, just to mention a few. Preparing organization for an AI-friendly environment doesn't happen overnight. It takes failure, determination, and endurance. It also takes openness towards each other, regardless of industry, organization, culture, and society. It takes strong will, wanting to grow together on a global level rather than competing against each other. It takes a willingness to listen to each other and learn from each other, sharing experience and knowledge and allowing information to flow from one industry to another. The last couple of years showed it clearly we are in the same boat and the water can get really rough. As we are all interconnected, if some communities, industries, and businesses don't navigate well, it can have crucial impacts on other communities, industries, and businesses. For this exact reason, we must share knowledge, experience, and information. It is not about competition. It is about survival, about share for success. We need to come together on neutral grounds where no competition applies. We as Swiss Cognitive provide this environment for over 5 years now, and today we facilitate the world's largest end-of-year cross-industry expert exchange joined by over 4,000 registered AI enthusiasts and over 500,000 followers on social media globally. It is our honor to have you with us, as well as our fascinating speakers sharing with you the status of AI today, where we are heading in 2022 and beyond, what challenges we are facing, and how we're going to tackle them. All that to enable AI to boost our societies, businesses, and economies worldwide. We have a packed agenda. In fact, it is so packed that we decided to extend the length of this conference about a half an hour. So I think this just shows that there is more and more to share and brainstorm about. In fact, on that note, don't forget to share in the chat where you are watching us from and start connecting and exchanging with each other, either directly on this event platform or on our social media channels. Our team does its best to connect people in this global network with over 500,000 followers, bring you to the latest news from the world of AI on a daily basis and provide you with the incredible speakers each month. But it is you who gets the conversation going. So keep connecting and exchanging. We may be the engine for this community, but you are the oil. Thank you for your commitment, inputs, and your time. Let me kick off our event with Michael, whom I interviewed last week. Dear audience, now it's my great pleasure to introduce you to Michael Møller. Michael is the chairman of the Diplomacy Forum, the Geneva Science and Diplomacy Anticipator. He's former Director General of the UN Office in Geneva and former Under-Secretary General of the United Nations. Michael, you spent 40 years as an international civil servant in the UN. You began your career in 1979 with the UN High Commissioner for Refugees and worked for the UN in different capacities in various locations around the world. You also served as a Secretary General of Special Representatives for Cyprus and was the Executive Director of the Kofi Annan Foundation. In the recognition of your efforts to deepen public understanding of the vital role played by the UN and its partners in Geneva, you received a series of awards from the City of Geneva, the Union Suisse des Attachés de Presse, and most recently, the Foundation pour Genève. You were also awarded the Bourgeoisie d'honneur de Genève by the Republic and Canton of Geneva in 2020. Dear Michael, thanks for giving us the honor to share your view with our global Swiss cognitive community about the AI trajectory 22 and beyond. Michael, the Sustainable Development Goals are on top of your agenda. Please tell us a bit more about these goals.
Thank you, Dalith, and thank you for inviting me to participate in your meeting. It's a pleasure to be with you. The Sustainable Development Goals are our global roadmap to solving the massive existential challenges the world is faced with today. But while they are widely accepted and implemented in many parts of the world, they still need a major and continued push across the globe at all levels of governance and in all our communities to have the required global impact.
Now, how do you see AI and quantum coming into this picture?
I am firmly convinced that the necessity and relevance of artificial intelligence and quantum applications as they develop cannot be overstated. They have the potential of being major game changers that will greatly help us with the much needed acceleration towards the sustainable solutions we need to implement at speed. And they have the potential to influence how we move forward on every single SDG goal.
I couldn't agree more, but there is, of course, always a flip side. Where do you see the pitfalls and the challenges, Michael?
Well, of course, there are many of those as we move ahead, but to me, it is really important to ensure that this happens with the required speed and impact, and therefore there are a number of crucial basic things that have to happen. The issues of ethics, governance, and equity have to be addressed globally and urgently.
Absolutely. Now, which approaches do you think can support us to address these issues?
Well, to start with the ethical dimension of these evolving technologies, they must be incorporated by everyone, scientists, politicians, and end users alike. We must ensure that we develop AI for good and not for bad. And doing so will also be crucial in ensuring the necessary trust in our communities. We must therefore also ensure that the required solid governance of these technologies is elaborated at the local, national, and international levels. This will ensure their orderly development, deployment, and use, and thus also strengthen the needed trust as they become ubiquitous in all our lives. And finally, we must ensure that the issue of equity becomes central in their management and application as enablers and accelerators of the SDGs across the globe. They must, by definition, be accessible to everyone on our planet and not just the well-off. And only by doing so will their full potential for the good of humanity be realized, and it is the responsibility of every single one of us to ensure that this happens.
And on the whole, how do you see the AI trajectory taking direction in 2022 and beyond?
Well, I'm guided by what our scientists are saying, which is that we will be moving towards general artificial intelligence and increasingly powerful quantum applications with deeply transformative impacts on our lives. And this to me means that we will have to pay even closer attention to the issues of ethics, governance, and equity. Thank you.
Thank you indeed. Dear Michael, thanks very much for sharing your insights with us. It was my great pleasure to interview you, and I hope to have you with us again in 2022. Thanks.
Thank you very much. All the best.
I have to say, sometimes I wish you would also see the recordings before the cut. We had an incredible time, a lot of laugh. I had Michael Møller for such an authentic way discussing, how shall we do it? Where shall we do it? Does the background fit? And this is one of the things that I really like. Obviously, we always try to have people live, but especially in these days, before Christmas, it's quite tough. And I must say a huge thank you to Michael that he took his time to do an interview with us. It was really an honor that he was able to share the core of this exchange and his insights. Now, talking about sharing, feel free to share your takeaways on LinkedIn and Twitter, and don't forget to mention our speakers and also Swiss Cognitive. Now, we are heading to our first panel. Time is ticking, and I'm happy to invite our panelists for the first virtual stage. Thomas, hi. We have Thomas chairing the next panel together with Mari, Kira, Robin, and Brett. A warm welcome to you on our global reaching stage. You have a very exciting task for today, Thomas, to share hands-on insights from your industries on AI. As always, we don't speak about Terminators nor sci-fi. We are here to do a reality check and to spotlight what is really going on in different industries when it comes to AI. Now, welcome, Thomas. You will chair this, and I'm inspired to see what you're going to do. A short introduction to Thomas. Thomas, you have more than 20 years of experience in business administration and information systems. You are an expert in intelligent automation and AI systems. You are actually a LinkedIn influencer with over 100,000 followers and hosts of your own AI YouTube channel. As CEO and founder of Instrel.ai, you automate content creation for thought leaders. Thomas, it's great to have you again with us on board to chair one of our Swiss Cognitive's AI panel. And Thomas called himself the Thomas AI nerd. And I think this is quite spot on, isn't it, Thomas? Can't hear you yet.
You don't mute, you unmute your mic. They say AI is easy. AV is hard, people. It is so hard to get that audio video right. Okay, I may have set that joke up.
Thanks a lot. And this is actually what we love. We always talk about what's going to take over the globe, but at the end of the day, we always struggle with basic infrastructure. So thanks for doing this. It also takes a little bit out of my pressure. So with you, we have on our panel, Mary. Mary, you hold a degree in electrical engineering and have more than 10 years of experience working with various industrial applications in different segments while working and living both in Europe and Asia. You currently lead the Digital Solutions Unit in ABB Motions, where you are responsible for growing the service and solution business through innovation, digital offerings that securely and efficiently connect our customers, motors, and drivers. You are passionate about innovation, technology, and customer experience. Mary, thank you for being here with us today. Further with you, we have Kira. Kira, you are the chairman and CEO of Diagnostic Robotics, where the most advanced technology in the field of artificial intelligence are harnessed to make healthcare better, cheaper, and more widely available. You have founded Sales Predict, that got acquired by eBay in 2016 and served as eBay chief scientist. You gained international recognition for your work at the Technion and Microsoft Research for developing predictive algorithms that recognize the early warning sign of global impactful events as disease epidemics and political unrests. You have been featured in MIT Technology Review and Forbes and are a frequent presenter at global tech and industry conferences. Kira, it is our great pleasure to have you with us today. And sorry, I just need to have a glass of water. Yes, this is just me, and you know me. Slicha v'toda. Okay. And now let me introduce you to our third panelist, Robin. Robin, you currently hold the position of the business technology leader at Johnson's Pharmaceutical Companies of Johnson & Johnson, where your supply chain mission is to provide hope and better health to patients around the world. You're driving results in the field of digital strategy, intelligent automation, and finance. You are a true believer of Johnson's vision to create a future where diseases are a thing of the past and are massively ambitious to help people live longer, healthier, and happier life through the aid of digital technology. Robin, what an inspiring mission and vision this is. A warm welcoming to you on this global stage. And last but not least, welcome Brett. Great to have you with us again, Brett. You are passionate in leading digital transformation and are leading today the data, analytics, and AI at PwC. Through the use of innovation technologies such as artificial intelligence, data, Internet of Things, and cloud, you have helped various clients across the Fortune 500 to elevate their business performance. Your passion and enthusiasm for technology have brought you to work with a wide range of different companies in various industries at several continents. Further, you have helped the NASA launch the first AI space. This is incredible. You also truly believe that mankind's technology-based future will be amazing if we go forward with open eyes and minds, and your frequently launched podcasts and blogs sharing your views on where technology is going and how we have to prepare for it. Brett, it is absolutely a great pleasure to have you on this stage with us again. So now, Thomas, Mari, Kira, Robin, and Brett, the stage is yours. Please give us the industry's insight from your experience, all going well beyond proof and concepts. Thomas, the virtual stage is yours.
Yeah, thank you. And you know, I love hosting panels, especially where I can bring the average IQ down significantly to this panel. I mean, my word, not only are you the best looking panel this conference has had to date, today at least, it's amazing. Hey, by the way, let's not forget Swiss Cognitive, Switzerland, amazing place to live. Even the flag is a big plus. Okay, lots of good places there. So before we begin, I think we should all get on the same page of how an organization probably should define AI. And no better than giving it to a consultant to keep it really concise and short. But we're going to give this to Brett. Brett, tell me how we should be thinking about defining AI as we go into just explaining some of the practical applications of it beyond theory. Oh, he has mute too. Yes,
yeah, I did. I wanted to follow your lead. I think the most important thing is to consider that AI systems are trained. They learn based on data. They're trained, which means they also behave differently as data changes. Most traditional systems are coded, written, scripted, rigid. AI systems learn and are trained.
For the master level consultancy that you represent. So thank you. You know, let's get into this. Let's start at the end. Let's start with these examples of practical. You know, there's lots of AI, lots of theory. Let's jump right into what, you know, let's go through each person on the panel here and let's give an example of where AI has been practically implemented into the business. Let's give a few thoughts. Let's start with you, Robin. Tell me where in your organization you have a win. Where has it been practically implemented?
Well, it is hard to pick one example, but one that I love is CSATs. It's a crowdsourcing technology where surgeons are able now to upload a video of a laparoscopic surgery and have a team of reviewers analyzing that video, promoting best practices, giving an assessment, a rating, and this tool is able to recommend, the right expert to match with some literature that you can get ahead of the game in your skills of scaling yourself. Picture it as a private YouTube where surgeons can get skills, and we have a machine learning algorithm that will detect practical opportunities for you to improve your surgeon practice. That's one example.
Wow, talk about mastering something in 10,000 hours, how that could accelerate and de-risk. Amazing. Truly, that's powerful. Let's go to Marie. Tell me how in your organization where you've seen it take hold.
I would say that we have a couple of different areas where we see this coming, and I wouldn't want to really limit it or kind of narrow it to tightly into AI, because if you would have asked me how I define AI, I would have said that's a tool to make better decisions. And for us, it often means we actually pair it with other technologies. It's not just the artificial intelligence. The only place I would say that it kind of dominates, however, is on the customer support side, where we've been able to also deploy AI solutions to really kind of like shorten the time we can produce answers to our customers about our product or whatever problems they may have. But the real big value cases, which are more on the industrial asset analytics side, there it's really a combination of technologies, and there we're seeing more and more this coming in on machine health applications paired up with things like physics of failure, the domain expertise that can be added to that equation. So yeah, I would say customer support for industry it's already kind of old news a little bit, but that's definitely something beyond proof of concept, and more we see it also paired up in the machine health side.
Thank you. That's you're right. You define it how you need to. Because it's going to mean something to different organizations for sure. And there's certainly a broad range of topics that cover AI and how from general AI to specifics. And maybe Kira, with that, define it how you think your organization's looking at it or how you thought about it, and give us an example as well where you've seen it practically being applied.
So I've been working in the healthcare field, specifically applying AI on top of this. We've been mostly focusing on preventive care. Till today, we had access to billions of historical visits to physicians and built AI systems that are capable to identify patients who are deteriorating, what intervention can actually stop them from deteriorating, and we've built operational excellence in integrating those preventive care. In other words, there's dozens of millions of people all over the world where AI is looking at their historical visits, trying to identify if they're off track medically, and alerting different type of physicians to take care of them proactively. So I think this is a great example of when you have a primary care physician for maybe every 1,000 people, 2,000 people, you can still do it manually. When you have 5,000, or when in the next 10 years we're going to have 3.8 billion people without access to primary care, we have to allude into machine learning models to help us identify those deteriorating patients.
Another example, and Brett, as you think about the consulting advisory side of it, your business has certainly transformed as well of how you deliver services and advisory. Take a few moments to talk about the not the buying side, but the advising side, how AI is impacting it.
So we're very much a data-driven business, and using AI and machine learning to not just understand vast amounts of data, unstructured data, comments, opinions, thought leadership, and things like that companies are producing and publishing, but also building out forecasting models. So our ability to forecast demand is game changing. And I think Mary said it well, that it's all about decisions. So how do we make decisions better using data and AI? How do we forecast and see ahead better? These are the things that we focus on. So I think we've done an enormous job focusing on skills development, forecasting demand, and then making sure we're investing in the right areas to help solve client problems as quickly as it's appearing in the market. And I think this being responsive, being able to make better decisions, be able to see further ahead is where AI is giving companies like ours huge competitive advantage.
And you know, let's continue down that path. So, and you can give another example if you need to describe this question. Is, you know, let's say Robin, what's changed and what challenges did you overcome? Like, you know, how, you know, 2-3 years ago you couldn't have done this. Maybe why? What challenges did you overcome, and maybe give a glimpse to what you see as next set of challenges?
Well, think of you know, customer center, where you take calls, you take orders by phone, by email, etc. Once upon a time, we had customer service people that had to open every single email, right? You need to open the email, you need to open the attachment, read a PDF, enter the order in your ERP system. Now, we have AI tools that can simply click a button, open the email, open the attachment, creates a case in our customer relationship management system, enters the data of the order into the ERP, and responds to the customer saying your order has been placed, or we have a back order, your product will get in X number of weeks, etc. All that without a human intervention. That was a dream a few years ago, right? Now it's a day-to-day reality.
Wow. And you talk about data. You know, Mari, when we've talked a few times, you are data. You may be a data robot. Actually, that might be a company. But anyway, tell me about where the challenges you've overcome. And I'm going to guess there's going to be data in your answer. So with that lead in, tell me about it.
Yeah, there's a lot of data in my answers for sure. You know, I would say that there are a couple of really, really important things. One is, obviously, if you look at industries and how do you apply these technologies in the industry, you need access to data. And there's actually, surprisingly, a lot of data out there already, but a lot of that is in very difficult access, you would say. So one thing that has happened in the recent couple of years, we've actually deployed technologies to access data that we haven't been able to access before. That's obviously quite key. You know, without access to data, it's a little bit difficult to apply technologies such as artificial intelligence or, you know, machine learning. So data access has improved significantly over the past couple of years through advanced sensoring, you know, to cloud connections, which is much more accepted these days. And I absolutely love what was said before in this panel, was that the beauty of AI is really that, you know, and these technologies is that they learn and they grow and they improve. And that is kind of the point in industries where some customers are still a little bit hesitating whether they're okay of sharing data, because sharing the data is one of the big barriers in industries. But more and more the dialogue has now changed towards, actually, you know what, I understand that I benefit so much from sharing data to trusted partners that can then deliver to me services that keep improving, keep learning, and keep serving me even better tomorrow than they do today. And this is a major mindset shift that has happened in the last 2 years, I would say.
Having access is obviously key to any model training. But Kira, talk to me in the healthcare space. You know, maybe not all the data should be shared and have access to, and talk about how you're addressing the right level of data access for the purposes of, you know, customer experience versus maybe business needs.
So I think a lot of the things that we see right now is data monopolies in healthcare. There's certain institutions which are treating patients with certain diseases, and they're the only ones involved that have access to this data. The problem is with this, they're preventing innovation with other companies that might have greater algorithms and can actually leverage this. And a lot of things have been changing right now, moving the control of the data to the patient themselves, so they can actually have control of the data they have, pass it from one location to another. There's a lot of value in getting a single location with all of this data, especially, of course, in a completely anonymized form. We need to keep this, especially health data, in a completely regulated way, because I think this is the only way for us to make automated discoveries. Every time we talk about the difference between privacy and everything we do in machine learning, my always the question is, are you willing to die for your data? Because if you don't give access to your data, and there is no algorithm to identify some rare disease or some complete personalized treatment for you, Are you willing to take this risk in the name of privacy? And I think different places will have different answers for this. We have to be extremely aware of what our data sees. And there's many algorithms that talk about compression of this data, making sure that no algorithms are actually seeing who's the individual behind it, but it's still getting the insights that can drive humanity a step forward.
That makes me think, leads into the next piece is as we get more practical applications, and Brett, this will go to you. How should organizations address the challenges of transparency, explainability, or even bias in the model? There's no real driving regulation. There's no oversight at this point that's really saying you must be this way for this industry. But as an advisor standpoint, you want people to lead, right? You want them to take the first steps to maybe influence how it should be. What is your take on those type of challenges with leveraging data and models for the purposes of AI?
So I think anyone who's responsible for systems that include machine learning and AI-based algorithms has to consider that they have enormous responsibility that goes with selecting the right data to help drive the right outcomes. And the worst thing that people do is they delegate AI to data scientists, say, here's a pile of data, go do something, instead of being connected well to the business, having the right stakeholders in a governance model, and making sure you're focused on outcomes that matter for the business. I'll give you an example. Almost every data set ever used to train AI is already out of date because it's based on data that's already occurred. And so if you're looking at data being used for hiring or for identifying rates for insurance or anything, it's based on history, which includes an enormous amount of human bias in that data, whether you pick the subset of data that's incomplete or you're relying on data scientists who might have looked at data from a very 10 years ago, 15 years ago, rather than really current views of data. What it causes is unconscious bias in the data, which then ultimately leads to the models, which ultimately leads to systems that don't behave the way you need to for your business. So we recommend first and foremost to have business leaders who are data aware, who understand how machine learning works enough to ask the right questions and make sure that the outcomes support the business, help customers, help employees, don't introduce bias and risk to the business and the brand. It's a tremendous responsibility for business leaders and a huge opportunity for people who've invested in skills as business leaders who also understand data and AI.
Fantastic points, and maybe shifting gears slightly on that, right? I'd like to focus on some of the competitive advantages, and I think one of them has to be around the people you hire. And right now, that's big. There's a big great attrition versus a great attraction, and maybe Robin, in your organization, how are you staying competitive, or how are you gaining an advantage in this phenomenon that's going on right now?
Yeah, that's a great question, the challenge for all of us. Huh? So in Johnson & Johnson Technology, we have this promise. We said we shape the future of healthcare by unlocking the power of people, technology, and insights. And you can notice the first item there is people. So we know that there's a phenomenon of attrition in many companies, but we have data now. So when people leave, it's not only because of compensation. We know now that it has to do with contribution recognition, with work flexibility, with having a clear platform for innovation, your relationship with your supervisor, etc. And most important for all of us technical people is the ability to continuously learning, right? To be always learning and have the opportunities to grow. So the commitment of Johnson & Johnson is to be the place where you will become and stay marketable by staying here and growing. So our CIO likes to say, our most important asset in this company is you, meaning each one of us. And we are doing everything we can for J&J to become the best place for our people to grow and develop.
Interesting that the people are the competitive advantage accelerating AI. There's a bit of irony, I think, somewhere in there. If I was smarter, I could figure it out on the fly, but I am not. So, Marie, I would like to ask you something, since you are the I'm going back to your data thing. How do you measure the success of these initiatives right now?
Yeah, we really look into the outcomes we can create to the customer, whether those outcomes come through saving money for them, improving their performance, or, at best, saving energy for them. Like, that's also something that we really focused on. We have the power really to impact a lot for the world energy consumption. It happens so that we are actually in a business of making equipment that happens to save energy And by applying these technologies, we have even better chance on finding those opportunities to save. So our way of really validating is really the outcomes we create for the customer. How much can we take away a risk or a pain of a customer, whether it's their downtime that they're suffering, they're losing raw materials or they're losing production, whether it's the energy they consume on the production. This is really the level of measure where we are at with this.
I think if AI could do anything, and I'll take this to Kira, if they could just help me not have to figure out a piece of paper every time I see the doctor, if you could just solve that, it's a win today for sure. If you don't have to write the same information every time. But I will ask you this, your organization, in the healthcare industry is typically a laggard market for technology, which maybe presents an opportunity to leapfrog. But that's going to have an impact on thinking and people. Tell me about, everybody about the organization's changing. What are you doing to help adapt it? What does a change management play? And everyone's going to get a chance to talk about this a little bit more because it's so key to implementing technology are the people, but they have to be trained and changed. So what is the organizational change management, maybe strategy, if you can share, or just, things to do if you're thinking of doing this out there, like a give back to everyone listening? What should people do on this front?
Okay. So I'll share with you something which is not new and has been practiced in several locations in the world. It's everything is eventually around incentive design. So coming back to my very specific field of preventive care, the moment that we are building incentives for providers and clinicians to follow our guidelines, sometimes monetary incentives, sometimes recognition, this is driving a lot of action. So when you're telling patients that, hey, this is patients that you have as a clinician, you're going to be reimbursed or getting additional incentives based on how healthy all of them are, it drives more adoption of those technologies in a much quicker way. And I think the healthcare field, especially in primary care, realizes very quickly that we have no other choice but to use technology if we want to make population health happen. And we have an entire new field developing right now called precision population health. If you think about this, we had precision health in general about, for example, in genomics, making sure that we're getting the right treatment. Population health was still an aggregated form. Everybody's talking right now about what is the right treatment, clinical treatment in primary care for this specific patient can actually drive results, and they're building an entire set of incentive design, both for the clinician, but also to the patients to engage more in activities that are going to make them healthy.
It's spot on. And, and Brett, you talked about it a little bit as well, in your organization, how are you changing, does it change in the profile of who you're hiring in even, or targeting from a client set, talk about how your organization is also adapting in leveraging the data that you're using in AI systems, but also in consulting.
And again, I did that. So let's flip this a little bit and think about what it means to consume AI within a business. And I think from a change management perspective, people focus too much on the idea that they have to force people to change. And in reality, a lot of these systems are actually taking grassroots progress within companies because they provide better ways of doing things. And I think when leaders, CIOs, chief data officers, and others focus on experience, doing the better thing easier, they'll find that these AI systems actually can become quite prolific and proliferate through the enterprise. You'll see pockets of data science popping up all over the place because data lakes and cloud-based data architectures are making data accessible. That's not because someone's forcing them to do it. It's because they can see meaning in data and they're beginning to expose it to the business. So I think there's a bit of a push that comes through education and enabling leaders to understand it, but there's also enabling through data access tools and methods, the proliferation of these technologies within an enterprise as well, so it can grow and deliver value organically. It's the same way that a lot of AI in consumer-based systems grew without change management, because it was better. And as these things help enable better decisions, improved automation, better outcomes, they will be adopted by people who understand them and embrace them.
And we have a few minutes left, right? So this is a very unique group because you're beyond POC. You're into practical application, and now you're, timing it. So we have a few minutes left. There's about 4 minutes or so, and there's 4 of you. There's 5 of us. Let's give back. It's good to give, right? Let's give a top 5 things to do or not do. Each person can choose one. Starting with you, Robin, that you should do if you're going to go down the path from beyond POC. What's your one advice tip that you'll start with?
go for a digital first leadership. It's not only a mindset. You need your leaders in your organization to set the example, to set the tone, and point out the path forward. And that has to go not only with the mindset, but right behind it, the organizational structure. We have been seeing digital and data science organizations, a lot of the information technology team. So we all become not only a service provider, but a strategic partner to reach the business strategic goals. I would say that.
Very good. That's, I think, sound advice. It's a good first lead. And every time a new person gives a new tip on this panel, the next person has less to say. So, Mari, you're up. What is your, I'm going to guess it has to do with data, but what's your tip?
Yeah, actually, no, not this time, Thomas. I would say that I will now kind of take a segue from what Robin just said and say that choose your partners. And actually, that means that you need to look beyond your traditional business ecosystem and value chain, and probably your value chain is no longer even a chain. Mine isn't. I can tell you that much. It's more of a web than it is a chain. So choose your partners. Really, this is not a battle that you fight alone. This is really something that you go together.
So you're recommending probably grab a partner who knows what they're doing first, and make sure it's a good one, because doing it internally and not built here is probably not the right approach to take when you're trying to do this. I
think that not built here thing is probably the most toxic thing that could happen to you in this field. So avoid that.
That's a solid one. Kira, how about you? What's the top tip you would do for going from POC to practical?
Building a POC that shows results, like in stock market, is the easiest. Predicting the future, that's the hard part. And I think the main difference is, do you have a domain expert working with you? And just building AI that looks at data without really understanding this and understanding really how you build an operationalization behind the scene of everything that you've done with the actual partners behind the scene is not going to have enough meaningful results. A lot of the things that helped us is joint teams of clinicians, data scientists, and economists working in a single group, delivering a single POC, and then working with the operation group to make sure that we deliver this to the customer in the best way.
So domain expert, focused team, bent on results, and knowing that the POC is not throwaway. It's an add-on. It's the first step of 1,000. Very, very good. And Brett, let's bring it home. Well, what is your top tip?
So in addition to everything everyone said, because those were awesome, unlock your data. And this is not just the data you control and manage, but all the data that matters to your business, which is often external. Bring it together, unlock it, make it accessible to your enterprise. It has tremendous value, but only when it's unlocked and accessible.
I love that the data and the consulting flipped on recommending each other's approach on that final tip. That's fantastic. We're going to look into that and why that happened. Here's the final tip I think we all missed as we kind of conclude our time. First of all, thank you so much for the participation and the absolute, that you've gone to practical. I think that's so cool, which was certainly missing kind of from the industry in the last few years. So if you're able to pat yourself in the back, you may do so now. But I'll tell you, the biggest tip, I believe, is right in front of us. It's that little icon. You need to go to more Swiss Cognitive events. That's right. Shameless plug back to Swiss Cognitive as we transition off this amazing first panel and for the rest of the day. But thank you so much for participating today. And there she is. Look at that. How'd that time so well? Amazing. Thank you, guys. Thank you so much. And from POC to beyond.
Thanks. And please remain with me quickly. I mean, why are you asking why it's on time? We're Swiss. Hey, this is the plus in our flag. You just mentioned it by yourself. I think I have to go a little bit to this side. We can see you better. It's pretty awkward to navigate behind the scenes. You never know what is left or right. So first of all, Thomas, Mari, Kira, Robin, and Brad, I mean, this was exactly what we're looking on. This hands-on insight to get a reality check on where we are today. And you brought some very interesting points, and I put some notes together. And I just want to reflect on them quickly because we have a few seconds still. One of the most important thing is what you guys have mentioned, guys and girls. I was just said that we have, be careful on our language. So what you mentioned is really about using the ecosystem. It's not a battle you're doing by yourself. It's actually not a battle at all. It's really about using partnership, ecosystem, and looking at each other on the same height. we all can profit. Therefore, and this is another argument that you mentioned, is leadership. This is very much core of the whole process. And the data, obviously, and yes, Brett and Mary, this is your core. This is something that we have to share. And Kira, what you mentioned, and I never thought about that from this perspective, although I always say we must share data. We must be links is 180. Sorry, I was just told to move to the other side. I'm telling you, I think once we're going to do like behind the scene and share with you what goes on here. By the way, just before we go on, you probably don't know that it's just only 5 of us doing the whole thing. It's quite stressful, although it's great, but there's quite a pressure of every single person making this cognitive virtual, working with all you guys. But let's go back to what I just wanted to say. So the whole thing, bringing it together, what we've listened to you, that it's up to us, the human being, also sharing data, it's up to us. So although we're talking about algorithms, about robots, about technology, cognitive technology, at the end of the day, it all comes back to the human being. It's our responsibility. And what I just wanted to mention, Kira, what you said, and I really like the way that you explained, whether, just need to make sure I bring it back as you mentioned it, whether you are willing to die for your data. And thinking about this sentence is actually that someone may die because we don't share our data. And we're always thinking about, I'm not going to share data because Big Brother's watching me and so on and so forth. And certainly we have to talk about all these points. But I think it's a very, very nice way to think about it, and that we need to think for each other, what goes back to the partnership. So saying that, thanks again a lot to all of you sharing with us your insights and your vast expertise. Now I say goodbye to you on behalf of the whole team, my dear panel, and I hope to see you all next year again on stage, on roundtables, on discussion, and hopefully also in person. So see you soon. Now, let me jump to the next phase of our agenda and welcoming Thomas on our stage. You may saw Thomas on our stages before. Thomas is one of our incredible minds in our global network too, and we're grateful to be able to share his knowledge and experience with you. Thomas, you have more than 20 years of experience working for UNICEF. Your aim is to find ways to empower children to reach their true potential as the main solution to many of the world's current challenges. You're currently UNICEF Director of Global Innovation, and together with your team, you focus on spotting innovations that offer transformational potential for children. From data science to AI, machine learning, blockchain, to product innovations to be picked up and used to that together global social goods can advance humanity and create. Thomas, what an inspiring mission this is. We are delighted to hear about your view, creating conditions for equitable AI development. Thomas, it's really great to have you here. The virtual stage is yours.
Thank you so much, Dalith. It's wonderful to be here, and it's wonderful to be connected to such an incredible array of professionals and experts. So I hope I will do justice to their own knowledge of the field, because I am not myself an AI expert. We work with a number of experts and trying to really benefit from their knowledge and their reach and how they can help us do a better job for children, simply speaking. So let me start by saying that, from a UNICEF innovation perspective, we're obviously fully immersed in AI and machine learning and various ways of using AI and machine learning to the benefits of children. So we are strong believers in the power of change, the power that AI, machine learning, and other applications offer to really leapfrog progress in a number of the countries that we work in, and also potentially be an incredible equalizer of opportunities for children. And yet we also think we need to really think together. We are, at the birth of a new way of life. This AI is not going away. Very likely this is going to be imprinted and immersed into just about all facts of lives in about 20 to 30 years for likely most humans on the planet. And so we are at the stage where we should reflect on, will that serve everyone? How do we frame this? How do we shape this technology in ways that it is offering equal access to opportunities, to choices, to ability to frame and shape the governance to everyone. So we'll share a few thoughts, and hopefully that'll resonate with most of you. I'm just checking with you, Dalith. Can we move to the next slide, or do you want me to manage the presentation? Okay, here you go. So we are seeing already significant gaps in the promise that AI presented, and that we all hoping is coming across from AI, and the reality of the ground. That is true, I think, and for any of us who is a little bit curious about that, we don't need to really dig much into this to understand. The returns of AI right now have been highly concentrated. They've transformed many aspects of our daily lives, but particularly so in high-income countries. Despite the dire need for efficiencies and effectiveness, a few only of these promises have translated into sustainable and transformative solutions the way we would want them to. When we look at investments in AI startups, a very small minority of those are focused on solving significant global challenges. Most of these are commercial nature, and that makes sense, but we need to figure out, we need to reflect on, how sustainable is that, and can we change a little bit of that pathway? Right now, US, Europe, China have been clear beneficiaries of this technology. That is reflected clearly in terms of talent as well as investment. If we look at the US and China alone, those two alone account for close to 94% of global investment in AI startups, and close to 80% of the availability of the world's top AI researchers. Just let these numbers sink in. What does that mean for the rest of us and for the rest of the world, of the global south? This means that adoption of AI in the global south is largely inaccessible because it is so very expensive. And that means that these countries are at best generally simpler provider of data, whilst being subject to the risk that AI poses due to them being users of technologies created by global digital corporations that they have very little ways to influence. There is also, of course, a discrepancy when it comes to the availability of data, both between and within countries. Inequalities in access to technology and connectivity leads to data being strongly biased towards those that are connected. When we started to work on epidemic forecasting for Zika and then for COVID, we found that the richest 20% of phone users generated more than half of the aggregated mobility data. And for us, that meant that if we hadn't factored that in our AI algorithm, it would have predicted essentially that the epidemics would reach and would essentially come across wealthier areas much more so than poorer areas, which is not necessarily accurate, obviously. And we know what COVID and how COVID is already impacting the global south with tremendous costs of lives and impact on the economies. So there is a need for concerted global efforts to reverse this trend and ensure that the power of AI can be harnessed for good. How do we do that? Let me share with you maybe a few thoughts that we believe are important in terms of setting the conditions that must be in place for this to be true. So first one, we need to look at moving forward on AI and ethics. The last few years have seen significant activity on defining AI and ethics globally, and ethics in AI. Organizations like OECD and UNESCO are showing genuine leadership in helping to define these global standards and the governance around AI. And yet that governance framework remains, I would argue, largely fragmented. If we were to be quite simplistic, we could argue that North America focuses right now on control of data by the private sector. The Chinese model would emphasize a little bit more control by the government. And the European model favors control of data by individuals based on human rights. If we keep the context as it is, there is a real risk of fragmentation in the AI economy and the AI governance, and that would hamper progress. It would reduce competition, and ultimately, it will likely mean that we leave behind developing countries on all fronts. if we dig further into that, there is also a need to have more and more nuanced conversations around AI and ethics in AI. From a UNICEF perspective, our focus is to ensuring that children benefit from AI and are protected from it, from its potential negative consequences. Last month, we launched the second iteration of our policy guidance on AI for children, and we are working very closely with global organizations such as H&M to help bring those to fruition. We are very happy and very proud that the government of Scotland launched its own national AI strategy in March 2021 and announced that it would adopt our policy guidance. We hope that many others may join. We also hope that many others and all of you in the room will keep studying, will keep querying, will keep engaging around how these ethics and these ethical principles need to become a part of processes that we don't even question, because we are sure, we are secure, we are comfortable in the ways that this governance will protect us, will protect our children, and will enable our children to not figure out 20 years later that maybe some of their data, some of their videos, some of their audios are shared in ways that make them very uncomfortable, or indeed may them feel being bullied online or offline. Let's move to the next one if we can. Now, we also need to work on preparing governments of the world to capitalize on that AI. When we look at the Global AI Readiness Index, and I've put a quick map here that I hope everybody sees, most of the Global South currently ranks quite poorly. Of course, with the exception of countries like India and China, who are actually world leaders in most of that. For most of the world's government today, AI is still in its infancy, and significant work needs to be done to create innovation capacity, to create talent availability, data democratization. Government, for the most part, do not have their own AI data capacity. Their reliance on global digital cooperation for AI solution will likely serve to further exacerbate the current inequalities. How do we deal with that? How do we equip these governments with the right tools, with the right expertise, with the ability to call on their own national expertise is going to be truly important. And the gains and the costs of these are visible already. With the COVID pandemic, it's been quite hard for all of us and quite poignant with regards to two quick sectors and sectors that are obvious to us all, which is health and education. We have seen children suffer greatly when governments who did not have the capacity to implement digitalized and personalized learning platforms were struggling to give and to sustain access to education for their children. Up to 90% of the world's children were cut off from their education because of the COVID pandemic at any given time. Some children have not yet gone back to school because of COVID. In many of the countries in which these children live, those are countries that are struggling with AI capacity, with digital access to personalized learning journeys, where AI and the appropriate use of AI will make transformational change in terms of the learning outcomes for their children. We must think of how we do that better as a world community, how we share the ability of AI to be a change maker for all and not just for the global north. The same is true for health, obviously, and we are learning progressively about various digital solutions, and part of my team's focus is to try to figure out how do we, again, use the digital solutions for health to benefit all of us. The next solution that I would like to offer to us all is maybe rethinking application of AI. We know, and it's been clear to many of us that are involved or are interested in social impact, that AI has the power to help communities that are vulnerable and marginalized. That's quite clear in areas of health, or education, or response to humanitarian crisis, or water and sanitation, or climate change. And at UNICEF, we have seen AI add tremendous value, whether it has been in helping us reach children and their communities with the right information and content around COVID, giving them access to information they felt was secure and trustworthy, whether it is about providing better real-time insights to understand what children need and what response will be most effective, again, through the use of AI. We're currently using AI and machine learning to figure out where are bodies of water to enable communities that are living in context of water scarcity to figure out where to dig and to have access to water immediately with a rate of success that is 3 times the rate of success that they had before based on their community knowledge. We're working quite closely with a number of partners to do that and to do better and to understand better their own use on the commercial spectrum of data and AI and machine learning to understand how we can inform better response to the COVID pandemic today, whether it's about the monitoring of various policies such as physical distancing measures, what that costs in terms of school closures to communities and economics. So there is a tremendous amount of knowledge that we can use for good if we are thinking about the application of data. Now, there is also a question whether we could think of a one-to-one, right? In the future of data, could we think of, if we look at the use of data in a commercial sense, could we get the global community to say, in whatever use case I'm going to try to use for AI, I'm going to try to reflect on whether that could be used for the global greater good in various ways in the South. And some of that could apply through what I would suggest is the fourth solution, which is investments in open source technology. Now, we believe that when we talk about data and the use of AI, of course, is generally built on access to data. We feel that there is a strong case to be made, and we hope that we can create champions out of all of you here in the room today, in the virtual room today, for more use and for more investment in open data and the use of open data. We believe that when we use open source, we give access to data in ways that currently is still very restricted. And generally, that access to data for many countries, for many companies, for many communities is prohibitively expensive. If we talk about open data, we talk about really a way to open up and to stop a centralization of data that stifles innovation, that potentially opens all of us to a place where we can have access to solutions and benefit from knowledge acquired, from lessons and expertise acquired in one country to benefit everyone. We are currently using some of that on the ground. We've created a venture fund, which essentially works very much like a venture capital fund. It's currently about 35 million, as well as 2,000 ETH and 8 Bitcoins. And it's a vehicle to grow new solutions and to shape markets of emerging technologies that exist at the intersections of what we call a 100 billion business market and 1 billion persons needs. In other words, can we find the sweet spot where really we can use solutions and invest in commercial solutions that make sense for the greater good whilst making sense from a revenue producing nature? We invest tickets of about $100,000 to $200,000 in commercial solutions, provided we have access to open data so that we can then generalize these solutions and use them in all markets and enable our partners, including governments, to then make these solutions their own in their own national context. Our hope, essentially, is that by providing early funding, these solutions can be scaled with assistance from private sectors and potentially social impact fund or purely PE funds. These investments are currently focused entirely in developing and emerging markets, and we build these as open source to allow all of you to benefit from them and adapt them to your own needs and to what you feel makes sense. We feel that beyond these early stage investment, we're hoping to build a global platform to make these data, these algorithms available as digital public goods. And that is what we believe is the pathway to the future, is for us to reflect more intentionally, more carefully, more systematically about what solutions that we have should become digital public goods alliance. Digital public goods. We've built an alliance around that with a number of partners and champions, and we would love for all of you to really join us. We believe that that's one of the ways for us all to walk the talk about an equal opportunity for all, and to walk the talk in allowing everyone, every community, every government to have access to solutions that make sense without having to pay huge and continuous licensing fees for things that they should have access to for free, because we know that these solutions exist, and we should be existing in a world or wanting to build a world where these solutions should be available, particularly to those who have the least resources to pay for them. That data availability and that dissemination of open, high quality, responsibly collected data is a key enabler of informed decisions and is a key enabler of future innovations. Let me move to the next one, which is really the supply and retention on AI talent. Now, AI talent is on the top of the executive agenda and consistently ranks today as the most prominent bottleneck for AI development within corporations. We are facing an intense demand for AI talent, and that has global consequences. As we see in this graphic, most AI talent globally ends up in a handful of countries only. And actually, if we drill a little bit beyond that, generally within actually a handful of companies only, not even the countries. What that means is that the cost associated with AI talent can tend to be prohibitive for the public as well as for the nonprofit sectors. So how do we flip that? There are significant and encouraging investments that are today creating more capacity for AI talent. If we talk about, for instance, the Center for AI Research in South Africa, yet that's far from being enough. For most of the countries UNICEF works in, there is a dearth of AI talent. There is a cost bottleneck associated with accessing AI talent, and it's quite complicated and hard work to ensure that there are robust local ecosystems that can provide employment and create added value through AI talent. Now, we've been trying to work at this with our venture fund. We've been trying to, again, create a pipeline of projects that actually are using AI talent from the Global South for solutions that are making sense in the Global South, and actually that help create, that help shape, that help train AI algorithm in a way that makes sense technologically and also commercially. We've invested in solutions there in the Global South. We are currently at about 116 investments in the Global South, of which, and we are very proud of that, more than 40% have been in female-founded or female-led businesses. And we are quite proud of these numbers. The vast majority of the investment that we have created are currently sustainable, about 80%. We have a survival rate of about 80%. We hope that that can be a pipeline that you can help us build upon that, and feel free to keep investing. We are happy to share that pipeline, and we would be very happy for the beneficiaries of that pipeline to benefit from further investment at acceleration stage or a larger scale. We feel that those are really worthwhile in creating a difference in their communities, but also in helping all of us learn about the power of AI for all of us and not just from a global north perspective. Let me close with maybe just a last few words. We believe that the entire AI ecosystem, whether we talk about the private sectors, the regulators, the educators, the governments, we all have an essential role in ensuring that AI as a technology plays a significant role in helping us achieve our 2030 sustainable development goals. Those are big ambitions, they are big targets. It won't happen by themselves. It will only happen by an intentionality of action, an intentionality of focus by all of us, and a querying and a prodding around what is the governance that we want for the world that in tomorrow's lens, in 20 years down the line, will have been shaped by the choice we make today around this technology and how it impacts us all. I hope that you felt this was engaging, and I look forward to reading the comments and listening to the rest of the event. Thank you for having me today.
Thank you, Thomas, and spot on. And yes, it was very much engaging as always, and we got quite some questions, but due to the time and the next panel is already waiting for being virtually on stage, I would like all the questions to be directed to Thomas directly via LinkedIn, or also we are more than happy to do an intro. But one thing I think it's very important is really, this is what Swiss Cognitive stands for, to engage and to support. And UNICEF, especially with you, Thomas, it's one of the things that we are supporting. So please catch up, support, and see what you, yourself, your team, or also your companies can do. With that, Thomas, have a great festive season and Happy New Year, and see you soon in 2020. And now back to you, dear audience. Our team is skyrocketing on the backstage, so feel free to use the chat, connect with us, ask questions, and we do our best to cover as much as possible. And as I just mentioned, if time is too tight, we're always here to do the intro to the speakers, or you can reach out to them directly via social media. Now, with being in the second hour of our agenda, it's time for me to introduce you to our next panel with investment in artificial intelligence, forecasted to grow over 50 billion by the end of 2021, and the global AI market expected to exceed 300 billion by 2026. It is fundamental that we at Swiss Cognitive also start talking about investment in AI for economic, human, and global advancement. For this very actual and important topics, we collected some of the greatest VCs, investors, and business experts for a brainstorming session. Molly, Laying, Dee, Cyril, and John, a warm welcome on our global reaching stage with Taking AI Investments Under Your Experts' Magnificent Glass. Molly, my dear friend, you are a rare breed, tough enough to advise CEOs and company boards, while empathic enough to understand the human dynamic and help people perform at their best. Having integrated over 80 acquisitions, you help senior management teams navigate, change, lead powerfully together, and actually win as one. Your night job, by the way, is the creator of the host of Say It Skillfully, a video series and podcast heard around the world. And it was my personal honor to be your guest on your radio show just recently. Molly, you are passionate about each of us being who we are and saying what we think need to be said positively and productively. My pleasure to welcome you here, Molly. You know your panelists on a very personal level. Let me hand over it to you. You know them and you will introduce them.
Thank you, dear Dalith. Welcome all. I am thrilled to be with our panel of esteemed AI and investment professionals. You'll hear their views on investing in AI for human, economic, and global advancement. They are rock stars in their own right. I'll share a bit on each. Growing up in the US and India, Dee Schwab is a veteran of private equity, working with the likes of KKR, Carlyle, and Primera. She has deep operating and business development expertise and served in chief operator officer roles in tech, media, and telecom, in particular the satellite sector. She knows what it takes to create value with the right capital structures, sustainable, profitable revenue, and operational efficiency. Dee's now COO of a startup of Bill Ackman and Neri Oxman, and I'll add, a passionate lover of animals and exceptional tennis player. John Balin, who joined Silicon Valley venture firm Canaan Partners in 1995, has been a general partner and veteran of seed and early stage venture investing over 35 years. He's worked side by side innovative entrepreneurs to build high performance companies sold to the likes of Dell, Oracle, and Expedia. His track record includes consumer and enterprise technologies. Before Canaan, John learned how to both fund and build companies through many operational and financial roles in private equity and startups. He enjoys being a mentor and lecturer on VC and entrepreneurship and is an avid hockey player and skier. Liying Wang is an expert in AI training, literally training the AI to learn through human annotations for nearly a decade. Most recently, as COO of X.AI, she led the successful exit to Bizzabo. She also ran AI training at X.AI, having fully automated meeting schedule assistance through unstructured natural language with a human in the loop in real time for a fault-tolerant product. Previously, Liying was at Facebook and an early hire at Lyft. She's also a collegiate tennis star. Last not least, Swiss-born and a citizen of Brazil, Cyril Viget combines computer engineering and econometrics disciplines with his investment banking and wealth management expertise. Over 20 years, navigating multicultural settings across 3 continents, he's capitalized on complex M&A transactions, structured lending, private equity, and asset management solutions for sophisticated clients and family offices. He co-founded and was general partner of an early-stage investment firm in Brazil. His focus now is digital transformation, applying AI, machine learning, and natural language processing in financial services. Used to skiing in the Swiss Alps, he's excited to hit the slopes with his son here in the US. So what a range of skills and experience. Welcome again to our great panelists. And to start, I'll turn it over to Cyril, who'll share some context on how AI investing has evolved.
So investment in artificial intelligence is actually really booming. Total funds raised by companies focusing on cognitive technology have grown from $2.6 billion in 2012 to a $75 billion by the end of 2020. So this is nearly a 28-fold increase within just 9 years. If you compare that in 2020, the total VC investments in all sectors was around $350 billion. So AI-focused companies received nearly 1/5 or 20% of all VC investments in 2020. If you look back to 2012, AI was only 3% of all VC investments globally. We expect this year that we come close to $100 billion of capital, which is deployed to AI startups globally. If you look at the main investors, the US and China have been undisputed leaders in AI investment so far, with over 80% of all funding coming from these two countries. And obviously also the money is flowing back into these countries into AI startups. Europe and UK each account only so far for 5%, followed by countries like Israel, India, but also Korea, and last but not least, Brazil. So the US and China have, in the last couple of years, distributed their capital a bit different. In the US, investors usually dispersed investments in much smaller amounts to much more companies, whereas in China, the focus has been on much larger investment amounts, but into fewer startups. So in the last 2 years, you see that the median amount investment per deal has increased significantly. This is a clear indication that investments are made into fewer companies, but also at later stage of their life cycles. And I think a reason for that is that the investment sector, but also the AI technology is maturing. And also the VC firms have moved from investing with the motto just spray and pray. I think that's a bit, in a summary, Molly, what's going on actually in the market.
Thanks so much, Cyril. I love that we're evolving from spray and pray. The numbers look like there is a great opportunity. We're going to go into some interactive rounds with our panelists. I'm going to turn it over and ask John a question. With what you've experienced over 3 decades, how do you see AI as an investment opportunity? Agree or not with what we've just heard?
It evolves over time. It isn't just a binary event and one day we wake up and, oh my God, everything is going to be AI, machine learning enabled. To be honest, this technology has been around a long time. It's just evolved to the point in which it's been emerged to where the press are talking about it. The autonomous car has really, that whole effort, as we've all seen, has kind of brought it to the forefront. But you've had AI in different levels, and expert systems back in the 70s and 80s were a place people focused on, but it wasn't that fruitful because the technology wasn't as robust as far as the processing power. The data wasn't available. Heck, we didn't even have the internet. So, you needed these components to really make this technology start to emerge. And we're reaching a point now, look at all of us today. We're on a video conference we were talking about. We wouldn't have done this even very easily 5 years ago. So what's happening is the components to make AI and machine learning are now in place. Kind of the rails are in, and now we're building on top of those. And as an investment thesis, it's hard to say, well, all we're going to do is AI, although people like to say that. It's really about what does it enable that creates a value proposition for a customer to make ultimately sales in a company. So it's really a component of technology that's now becoming more prominent, more available with the advancements from NVIDIA and Google and all the open initiatives in AI. It's brought it about that you don't have to be a big conglomerate or a major tech company to use it. That being said, Google's in there, Facebook, Apple, has bought 25 AI type of companies. But you'll see in the startup world, it's starting to come to emergence of places where really can be utilized and most valuable as a product or service. And some of this stuff is kind of pedestrian, but useful. Customer services, chatbots we're all used to. Probably at this time in your holiday shopping, you've interacted with one and not a person. So it's slowly emerging into things that are interesting. And I think it's exciting because that's the next frontier. It's enabling more technology to create, some interesting companies.
Yeah, that is super helpful context. It's a flash out of the pan and new. Perhaps Dee, chime in, valuation methodologies, timelines, risk, what might be different? What might people consider differently with AI?
Well, I think if we look at businesses, we always say, businesses primarily fail or don't do well for two reasons. One is lack of good ideas or lack of good operations, right? So I know there's a lot of focus on the AI from a technical standpoint, but I just wanted to touch base a little bit in terms of operations and how to create value, from a value creation standpoint. Because ultimately, whatever methodology you use for valuation, whatever exit multiple you're going to get is going to be based on what the value you create in the company. There's a lot of data out there that's used for private equity companies, companies that are managed by private equity. As investors, you will see a uptake in the exit multiple. Why is that? Because a lot of PE companies, again, I've been on the operating side for KKR, where we were actually in the portfolio company, on the portfolio company side. I've always been on the operating side, by the way. We see that there's a methodology. My very good friend, Bill Cornog, who runs Capstone Consulting, I know how he runs his team. Very thorough approach. When you go and invest in a company, you go in, you're doing a SWOT analysis, you're putting a plan, you're looking at the management team, you're looking at the capital structure, you're looking at, product development, market development approach. You're slicing and dicing that company every which way, and you're coming up with a solid plan for organic and inorganic growth. If you look at, and this is for mature PE companies on the PE side, but if you look at it from a venture capital standpoint, these are relatively young companies, right? They're just starting out. And so you will find, especially now, as John said, AI has been around for a long time, but now that it has a spotlight on it, and companies that are particularly focused on AI, hardcore AI, you have a lot of young, bright minds, people who really, there's no lack of good ideas. There are a lot, amazing ideas. But I think where we have seen some issues is on the execution side. And execution is as important as coming with a set of great ideas. And that's where I think I would urge the people who are watching this panel is to pay equal importance. How you want to put your capital structure in place, what are your incentives, what is the solution you're selling to the customer, as John said. Ultimately, you're using the artificial intelligence to provide a solution to the user. And what is that solution? What are the competitive dynamics? And looking at your business model and doing that sensitivity analysis and understanding your risk, understanding your downside, understanding, what are your KPIs to drive the upside. And I think when you go with a very disciplined approach, if you have that discipline, I think from an investor standpoint, it gives investors a lot of comfort level, and they're going to be more prone to investing in your company. But it's important to get the right help. In terms of the valuation, whether you're looking at it EBITDA multiple or DCF or companies like DeepMind where they were in the red and Google gave them a valuation in hundreds of millions of dollars. It all depends, what is the product and the solution you're selling, and depending on the industry. For satellite industry where we
decided to go left or right, it's today, and make sure that we develop into a responsible and trustworthy AI where these are the algorithms. I'm just checking back quickly, see where we are. We're back. Hey, I'm telling you, I'm sweating now. Because first of all, I'm just talking to a camera. I have no idea what the people think and how annoying it may be. And I'm doing my best. The team is doing its best, and the speaker anyway. So welcome back, the speakers. And I hope that you will remain with us. Back to you, Molly. We can't hear John. John, you need to unmute
Yeah,
yourself.
maybe you can look through it. But the data is only the beginning of what makes a real business, right? Who are the leadership? Where's the culture? Where are they thinking the business is going to aim? Those are all soft things. I'm not sure how you can automate that, but what you can do is ask the hard questions. Is there an analysis that's in the marketplace that can help you see what may be happening, to ask the leaders what's the right question? Is there things happening that they're not in concert with their competition, where they stick out like either behind or ahead of them? So you kind of use these things as tools in research versus action in the early stage business, and as a way of keeping you informed of things about what's possible or what could happen, so you're enlightened to keep your eye open for some of these things. I just think that, the AI, the augmentation of ourselves, as we were talking about in scheduling a task that's as simple as that, how hard it is. We've seen this time and time again in any automated systems at all, and no matter what it is. And it always follows. Everybody's dealt with Siri or with Amazon and all the things that happen there, right? We're all familiar with that on the consumer side. But what's really intriguing in some of this is things like in deep science. There was recently work with scientists using AI for new properties in materials science. What a great application. We know probably full well in healthcare, in the protein folding over, ability to actually more quickly develop algorithms for that. Years ago, there was companies in Boston that went public that looked at radiology and helping the radiologist rediscern issues within an image, right? That is where some machine stuff actually has really augmented human work versus the classic, let's let the plane fly itself or the car drive itself, which I think everyone from TV and science fiction gets enamored with, which is really kind of a great goal because it is really hard problems. But it's the aftermath of all that, the things that you can do because people are focusing on that, they start solving some problems that are really practical. In security right now, there's a lot of companies using AI in security, which is a great problem because it's not a black and white problem. It's a great problem. So, it's kind of fun to see that. In the like I said, in the investment business, I think it's, the hedge funds originally had all this advantage to themselves. Now, actually, some smaller people and individual investors can have access to some algorithms that, heretofore only the big guys had. So, I think it's the democratization of the industry a bit.
Yeah, nice. Dee, I saw you nodding your head a lot. Any thoughts you want to add?
Yeah, no, I think John covered it really well. I mean, basically, you kind of look at risks in two different areas. You have systemic risks, and I think that's an area where AI can really help, which are, risks that are pertaining to a particular sector for a particular industry. So if you're looking to invest in a particular sector, yeah, AI can help you, and they can look at the trends and look at the comps, how valuations have done for those companies in that particular sector, or what's the market doing, et cetera. And I think how companies have performed in that sector, what affects the sector, et cetera. And I think it can do a great job in identifying the systemic risk. And then you have, idiosyncratic risk, which are very, very, risks that are pertaining to that particular company, and it's not a systemic issue, right? So you may have an issue with a particular company because you may have a bad management, or you may have the culture is bad. You may not have right sales incentive program, and I don't think those are the type of things, as John rightfully said, AI cannot really go in and they can't point those those risks to you. And I think it's a combination, so you use AI. I think the smart thing to do is to understand where AI can really help you and understand where it cannot really replace that human factor, right? You need empathy to manage a team a certain way. You need to be an empath, the human intelligence in how to manage a team. At the end of the day, execution is all about people as well. And so there are things that the human factor is going to be involved. And I think the smart people really know
where you want to really leverage AI and where you don't want to leverage. So I think, so I think it depends on the risk and depends at what you're trying to achieve. I think just one other thought, John, you mentioned, a lot of the work AI is doing in the field of science and other areas. Yeah, I was always in the TMT sector. So, big satellite companies such as Intelsat, ABS, I know they've done a lot of Internet of Things, connected cars, etc. And that's, as John said, it's everybody, it's sexy, but it's a given. But I think John is right. There are a lot of things happening in the area of science. When we look at how there's work, phenotyping with plants, or whether, basically a lot of genetic work at the DNA level, where all that modeling, when they're trying to hack the genes and trying to see, different transcriptions, different expressions in the genetic makeup of whatever things the scientists are looking at, whether you look at Wyss Institute, which is a collaboration between MIT, Harvard, or Cambridge, or a lot of these academic institutions in the world, I think a lot of them are looking at AI. They are looking at genetic modeling, et cetera, and they're using AI for computational work that's been done. So I think it's amazing, in particularly those areas, because it can really serve humankind. And I think, so it has a lot deeper meaning, and in some ways we're kind of looking at machine learning, and you're looking at machines, artificial intelligence, and then there's the human factor, and it's a beautiful thing when both of them kind of cross over, and one is helping the other, the mankind. So I think it kind of reaches you at a deeper level, I think.
Yeah, we're going to connect. I want to offer that we have a question from the audience, and I'm just wondering if any of you have thoughts. There was a new EU law on artificial intelligence, and does anyone have thoughts or is familiar with it, and perhaps if there are any negative impacts on what it might mean for investing in AI in Europe?
I think I'm the only European here. Well, I don't know the law, so it's difficult to make a statement. But with any law which comes into force in any capital market in the world, be it in Brazil, the US, or Europe, or Asia, in the end, the investment markets are very efficient. They always find a way to deal with laws. I don't think that this European law will be that it is prohibitive to invest into AI. I think it's rather going that we make sure that the ethics and all the biases which could come into the systems are somehow handled in a way that we don't run into major issues in the future. But I personally don't see any reason not to invest in a cognitive technology company because of a new European law. And also, knowing Europe quite well, it usually takes a long time until it is in place when they start talking about it.
Brazil, Russia, India, China, I think some of the most regulated markets in the world, the investment community still figured out how, a way to go into those markets and make investments, despite, the markets being heavily regulated. I mean, China is a great example here. So I'm sure the investment community will figure out a way to work around it, or work with it, I should say, rather,
Well, what's so funny about this is that, you look back, I'm just thinking when you were talking, Cyril, about every time I get on a website now and I have to deal with their cookie policy. Okay. And this is all coming through the thing. I'm like, would someone just please stop this so I can move on with my life? I mean, it's funny. Some of these things are putting, so we're going to protect everyone, but it sometimes becomes more of a hill to climb than a valley to roll down. And it's day to day. People are changing their minds about all of this stuff. So these early laws in an infant, AI to say what you'd put a law on, no matter what they've decided, it's all going to change again, because the way we use this technology is moving continuously. In fact, it's moving faster than ever, which is why the investment community is jumping on it. But it's kind of funny when you think about the whole cookie thing, because I think now it's become a hindrance, not a help to a lot of people.
We have some chuckles about that. So I'd love to shift gears, because a big part of this is really how can we as humans drive the AI to make a better world? Sure, you can do a lot of things. It doesn't mean you should do them. So perhaps thoughts from you folks, considerations on the investor side and on the company side for ensuring that AI really does benefit humanity, sustainability, create a level playing field. I'll keep it open, but ways that we can really have AI for good. Leanne, you want to kick us off?
Sure. One thing I think is really important, and both Dee and John have touched on this earlier, is focusing on a problem and solving the problem, and then just using AI as a tool to, enhance it somehow or drive efficiency somehow, rather than just to build AI for AI, which I think sometimes companies get a little bit into a pitfall with that because it's fun and it's exciting and it's new and you can do really cool things. But I'd say focusing on the problem and then using technologies to solve that problem is probably what I would recommend everyone focus on.
Some thoughts on, there are cool things out there. So we'd just love to hear thoughts on some of the problems that are out there that you see folks are tackling, just to kind of help spur the ideas of folks listening.
Yeah. So Molly, I can just a thought for the viewers here. I mean, last year, the anthropomass on this planet exceeded the biomass. And it's a pretty profound thing, which is everything man-made has exceeded nature-made things on this planet. And so I think, as we move more towards machines, and it, again, if you bring an ethicist on the panel, it's always interesting to see and hear what they have to say about, are we moving from becoming more human and becoming more robotic in our ways, how we approach life. And I think a thought here, just, we kind of developed this over time. We have continued to develop this technology, and it's at a point right now where it is under spotlight. Investor community is investing into this technology, but on the other side, you also see a huge growth, and Cyril and John know this, with the impact fund, ESG, environmental, societal, governmental areas. Big companies are focusing in it, in those areas as well. And impact funds have grown substantially, the investments into those funds. And I think if we can leverage this amazing technology to create solutions that can help the planet, and also tap into, from an investment standpoint, you could tap into those impact funds, etc. I think that would be a win-win, win for humanity, win for the nature. I think we need to be human-centric. We need to be nature-centric as well. So I think leveraging it for societal good would be a great thing.
Yeah, so fabulous. I'd love, perhaps, John, some thoughts. You hear ESG can be good marketing. Just curious what you're seeing in terms of the reality of folks. It takes a lot of discipline to understand, how we're helping the climate or using materials properly. You can't just wave your hands around it. So thoughts from you, please.
Yeah, again, in the venture side, all of it. I think we're all ESG centric, especially living in California. Like it or not, you're going to be that way. But there's no one thing that influences these things, right? It's more a systematic awareness. And the more we talk about this, the more aware everyone is, from the biggest companies to the smallest. Like, how can we better, maintain, our environment? How do we see it here? I mean, like I said, living here, you're seeing it full bore with the fires and everything else that happened. We're living it, and so I think everyone's much more aware of it. And it's also, but it's hard to become, like any investment area, the only thing you invest in, right? Because I still need a company, I still need revenues, I have to employ people to pay them. So if I don't have a business, but I have to incorporate in sort of the kaleidoscope of things that are factors in my business, and it needs to become, instead of the bottom of the heap, the middle of the top. What can we do as a company that can improve that? Do I keep my people working from home more? Do I use more computer technology? I mean, one of the things I was going to say in AI that's often forgotten is one of the great advances that AI has done is natural language processing, right? And GPT-4 is coming out, which is going to even have more. The more we can communicate with one another, we all take for granted we're all speaking English here. But anytime you have a way of any system having a common language to talk, it's called open systems, things prosper, and the world will prosper when all of us can communicate better. From the people, I mean, you go to India, and how many different languages and dialects are there? Okay, from China, people want to learn Chinese. But I don't need to spend my time learning Chinese if I can have a system that helps me speak with someone who's Chinese, right? Or lets me communicate or make my product capable. And it seems really pedestrian, but it's not. And if we can have communication across the world that's more clear and easier to understand, we'll have better, community and a better way to work together to solve some of these things, because now we have communication. So it's kind of been lingering in the background, but it actually could become very, very important as time goes on.
John, just here to add, when you look at AI, it's in the public, people fear AI. It's a negative thing if you talk about AI. It's always about substituting humans rather than augmenting human capabilities. And this is an important point. When we look at, and when people now come up, these biases in this AI system, which doesn't include minorities or has a bias in this or that, we shouldn't forget what AI did for a lot of disadvantaged people to get included in our workforce. People which I have seen, for example, at Google, a software developer who is blind. He's working as a software developer full-time like all the others. And this is also what AI is doing, or robotics. People which by accident or in a war lost their legs suddenly are walking around like normal human with two legs. And this is also what we have to think about, and all the inclusion we can do for people which are still in poverty.
Yeah, there's huge, huge, huge impact there. Anyone else want to chime in on ideation, dreaming big, what else we can do for the world with AI?
I'll kick.
Go ahead, John.
Yeah, I'd kick off. I think, going back, the subtlety that most people don't recognize, as we talked about earlier, is the integration of AI technology and ML into science and research. It is really helping move science faster, to be honest. And every discipline is utilizing it and looking at it, because in the end of the day, scientists and engineers are looking at data, and they're trying to understand a phenomenon. They're trying to explain the phenomenon. They're trying to predict the phenomenon. And these tools have now made the computerization, other than just storing data in a database and analyzing some graphs or some trend analysis, we're getting far more sophisticated with it. And I think that's, it's not the one that's sexy, as we talked about, with the robot that's going to clean my house and take care of everything and, make my calendar right. But it's the stuff that could make batteries more efficient. It's the things that can make drugs more personalized, medicine more easily done. But, look what we've done with, the mRNA technology. But you go through that, and it's those things that may actually become, if we had this meeting 20 years from now, we'd look back and say, wow, where was some significant strides? That might be one of these things, it accelerates your research, right? So I think it's pretty exciting.
Yeah, no, we love that. As supporters of our engineering school, John, we're like way pro on that. Dee, you were going to chime in.
No, I think John covered exactly what I was going to say. And just quick thought on what Cyril, you mentioned earlier in terms of people thinking AI is going to just replace humans, and I've heard that many times as well. And I think there's a little bit of education that needs to happen, especially we take it for granted. We here we are, most of us in the United States, and we understand it, I think. But if you go to other parts of the world where there's not so much awareness about this technology, I think there's definitely that sentiment. So I think we do need to educate people, and I think people need to see how this technology can really help progress things. John, I think gave an excellent examples, and I think so I think it's still, although AI has been around for a long time, I think it's still in some ways it's pretty young industry, because it's just been in the spotlight just in the recent years. And I think so that it's the progression path, it's happening right now, and I think with education, I think there'll be more awareness as well. So.
Yeah, well, that's one of the things we love Swiss Cognitive for convening enthusiasts in AI and helping everyone learn. And you folks are such a big part of it. As we bring this home, I'd like to ask our panelists, whether it's a top takeaway that you have from hearing each other, or just kind of an aha, or maybe the future of AI, a thought for the audience, I'll just kind of give you a chance to provide some closing comments. And Lee-Ying, why don't you kick us off, please?
Sure. So, as John said, wherever there's data, there's potential for AI. And, of course, that's super alluring for, a lot of companies. And from, the chats I've had and advising people in companies big and small, whatever industries over the years, I always caution around the organizational setup of the teams, because, data science, including AI training, needs to be incorporated, really closely with the product teams. And, it just cannot function in isolation. And I think because there's some mystique around AI, I think there's sometimes a common misstep that, it's a magic wand that can be, in isolation and then something magical happens. But I think like what's really important to remember is that the more integrated the product teams and the data science teams are together, that's where that magic can really happen.
Love it. Thank you very much. Cyril, thoughts?
So I personally think that AI is, as the fourth industrial revolution, already taking place now, like the electricity which we received, and a lot of us are fearing what's coming. But I think, and you say this, Molly, always in your radio shows, the sooner you accept that you're part of the problem, the faster you're part of the solution. I think the sooner you accept that AI is coming in every part of our lives and you get used to it, the better you will deal with it in the future.
Yeah, let's embrace it, not fear it. I really, really appreciate that. Dee, over to you.
Yeah, I think I have a little bit, kind of different spin, which not necessarily a different spin, but I look at it differently in a way, because I think with privilege comes responsibility. And, as human beings, we have the privilege of having a highly developed frontal lobe, so while we are responsible for creating these amazing technology, and I know it has a great future, even from an investment standpoint, absolutely. I think AI has a big role to play in our lives. But with that comes responsibility, and only we, the human beings, have the ability to direct this technology and leverage it to do the right things. So I think, again, I know there's a lot of fear in terms of, it's like a double-edged sword. It can do a lot of damage, it can do a lot of good, and we want to absolutely make sure that we we handle it with a lot of care, responsibility, with a lot of integrity, and we leverage it in a right way. To help us and help the planet. So yeah, I think bright prospects for AI.
I love it. I love it. John?
I take my takeaway is that AI is kind of the missing ingredient, and it's a way of identifying that ingredient in digital transformation. If you think about computing, back when we had the personal computer, that was going to be all end all, mainframes, the cloud's going to solve everything. And now you look back, well, it wasn't quite everything that we thought it was, but it's this evolution that we're on. And the beautiful about this evolution is now we're reaching the tipping point where, yeah, we can actually have computers do the things that people thought they could have done, 25 years ago, because there's enough data. There's all the things we talked about with AI. And I think it's upscaling our capability, the digital transformation in the workforce, either if it's from a basic job to a sophisticated job. It allows people to start embracing this. And maybe I don't have to always be a computer engineer to do all this. Now I can just use these tools. And I think what's great we love about Apple, those who like it, is that they took a very technical thing and made it very easy to use for people. And guess what? I think yesterday, or whatever, they're the most valuable company in the world, right? And at one point, no one thought that was going to ever be the case. And the reason is they made technology approachable and usable, right? And I think AI is now driving that through the infrastructure and the fabric of digitization. And it's from very sophisticated things to simple. And we might be really seeing this next wave really get accelerated, because this is going to be practically useful. I mean, we all have a phone, and guess what? We have access all the time, and it's kind of the entryway to utilizing a lot of this technology. So I'm very optimistic about it. I think it's going to be very helpful to a lot of people.
Yeah, it is phenomenal, really phenomenal. Well, I want to thank everyone. It's exactly this kind of conversation that helps us, learn and make the most of the technology and showing how humans and machines really can come together for a better world. John, Dee, Cyril, Liying, I am so grateful for your thoughts, your engaging conversation, and really to all the attendees too. We appreciate you and how you're supporting AI for a better world. So a heartfelt thank you and happy holidays, and we'll go back over to Dalith.
Thanks
Thank
a
you,
lot.
Molly.
Thank you, Molly.
Thank
Thanks
you.
a lot. It was really great, really interesting. And what I just love, it's really AI is cross-industry, cross-commodity, cross-technology. It is a basic infrastructure more and more. And Cyril, you mentioned it's like electricity. Actually, we're not asking ourselves whether we should use electricity. We're just asking ourselves which one, which sources. There are so many things to share. And Molly, as expected, great expert channel sharing. We cannot wish better one or more. And Liying, Dee, thank you for your insights and sharing your extensive experience with our community so openly. This is exactly one of those conversations which is hard to stop. And with the development of AI, I'm sure that this is a topic that we will continue intensively talk about early next year. We will definitely stay tuned. Now, let's connect and continue this exchange after the festive season. And out here, we have a lot of great people with great minds about AI. And when I think about AI and the ethical aspects, it's a lot to do also with say it skillfully. So I'm sure Molly's open. If you reach out to her, if you want to be part of this great radio show, you know where you can find her on LinkedIn. Otherwise, I'll be happy to do the connection. Now, when we are talking about all these possibilities, development and investments around AI, it is also important that we talk about challenges. So we're going to the next panel. Thanks a lot and see you soon. Now,
Bye.
we have an incredible panel coming up that will focus exactly on the challenges. Dear audience, feel free to send us your views on the challenges that you believe your industry and your organization may face when it comes up to the AI trajectory in 2022 and beyond. We are curious to hear your views and suggestions to solve these challenges with joint forces. The last couple of years showed it clearly. We are in the same boat and the waters can get really rough. If some communities, industries, and businesses don't navigate well, it can have crucial impacts on other communities, industries, and businesses. For this exact reason, we must share knowledge, experience, and information. It is really not about competition. It is about sharing. Now, I would like to welcome our next panelists, Martina, Kansu, Itzik, and Pierre-Philippe on the stage. Great to have you with us. Let me dive straight away and tell you who these people are. Martina, hi. You have more than 10 years of experience in an international journalism. You are a widely known TV presenter with expertise in a lot of connection to China and the Middle East, and have held interviews with some of the world's most influential people. You have moderated big global business events such as the World Economic Forum. You have worked for international brands such as Thomson Reuters, and you speak an impressive amount of language, which are 9. Hey, Fox, she speaks 9 languages. This is so great. And great it is because the more language you talk, the more you can learn from other culture. Martina, we highly appreciate your presence here. Looking forward you leading this discussion. With you on the panel, I want to welcome Kansu. You are a philosopher and the founder and director of the AI Ethics Lab, where you lead teams of computer scientists, philosophers, and legal scholars to provide ethics and analytics and guidance to researchers and practitioners. You also serve as an ethics expert in various ethics advisory and editorial boards. You have a PhD in philosophy, specializing in applied ethics. You primarily worked on ethics of technology, having previously worked on ethics and health. Previously to that, you were a lecturer at various renowned universities in the world. You have been listed among the 30 influential women advancing AI in Boston and the 100 brilliant women in AI ethics. You are also the first technology and AI ethics in Turkey. Wow, this is so great. Great achievements, Kansu. It is great to have you with us on board. Additionally, we have Itzik. Itzik, you are a professor at the Blavatic Interdisciplinary Research Center at Tel Aviv University. You have graduated from Tel Aviv University with degrees in mathematics, physics, and philosophy, earning your PhD back in 1988. You have served as head of military R&D of the IDF and the Ministry of Defense. You have received the Israeli Defense Award twice and the Israeli Air Force Award. You're chairman of the Israeli Space Agency, and you have helped the PM of Israel plan its way to become a major player in cybersecurity and now lead it to the next revolution with its secured artificial intelligence. Who else than you can do that? Itzik, you have an impressive story. We are very much looking forward to have you again with us. Toda rabba. In addition, we have Pierre-Philippe. You hold a degree in mechanical engineering, oceanography, and management. You're passionate about connecting the power of high-tech, data, ideas, and people together to address global environmental challenges that we face on our planet, such as climate change. You are currently based at the PhilApp Export Office at the European Space Agency, where your job is to explore the impact of new digital transformative technologies, such as artificial intelligence, to mine the large amount of data sets delivered routinely by Earth observation satellites obtaining our planet. Pierre, it is great to have you with us on stage. Now let's hand over to Martina. The virtual stage is yours.
Thank you so much for your kind and absolutely brilliant introduction, Dalith. We appreciate it very much. A warm welcome to the AI 2020 Plus Global Challenges panel. We have a lot to talk about, so let's dive straight into the topic. And I would like to start off with a question to all of the three amazing panelists, which is, what is your top global AI challenge for the new year? Let me start with Isaac. What is your #1 challenge?
I don't want to speak about my challenge, but about the global challenge, as you said. Now, I think the main global challenge is not directly connected to AI, but indirectly. It's once we will develop, and we will, AI technology, and we'll start applying it, it means that we will be more dependent on computers. And this is good. I mean, it makes our life faster, more efficient, etc. But it has also a dark side. And the dark side, I think, is the most worrying global challenge that I would see. And this is how we will protect ourselves from bad guys that will use this dependence of us on computers, of course, AI in this case, but they will use it not for the sake of benefiting the society, but for doing harm for their own interest.
That is Isaac's #1 challenge. We'll get back to the dark side of things and how maybe we can do something against that and confront this challenge. Now, Cansu, what is your #1 AI global challenge for 2022 in 30 seconds?
Okay, so I am going to be biased towards the work that I am concerned with. So for me, from my perspective, I think the biggest challenge is how we can integrate ethics into the AI systems systematically and adequately, so that at the end we have these functioning great AI systems that are also treating the society as well.
AI really as a tool to mine the large data set that we get from the satellite. So what we want, we know that this tool is really powerful, but we want to have trust in this tool in order to have uptake of this technology. And to have trust, we need to understand what's in the black box, what are the strengths, limitation, etc. So we are doing research on this, and this is really a big challenge.
Ethics is a buzzword, of course, when it comes to AI, and all of you have mentioned this in your global challenge. Now, Isaac, you have also often talked about the ethical codes that we need when it comes to artificial intelligence. What are some of the codes that you think we really need and which apply globally as well, and not just regionally or locally?
It's for me. Well, this is a very complicated question because we speak about ethics in two different senses. One is, as you said, ethical code. I mean, the researchers, the industry, everyone, what should be the rules of the games from the ethical point of view, the ethics of the profession. Another thing, which is entirely different, is that what new things can be made by intelligent machines, we speak about AI, that will face us with certain ethical problems that we are not used to face until now. Okay, let's say I use a car, a normal car, and there is some problem with the car. I can always say, okay, who is to be blamed? The producer, the driver, etc. Now let's imagine it's an autonomous car, and it now has its own AI software, which means it learns from its experience. It's not only something that was frozen in the factory as what sent as a product, and it may change its behavior during the driving itself. And then it may face certain problems that we cannot even foresee. I mean, we, the industry, the researchers, etc. And these problems, usually we don't have clear answers to these problems. Let's say I drive now the car, I see in the mirror some huge car is going very fast, and if I continue driving, it will kill me. I may take the wheel in a normal car to the right, but then I will go over a group of kids, something like that. What should I do? Now, imagine yourself, it's not me. I mean, what's happening in our life, we don't tell you, and when we give you a license, we don't tell you what to do. We ignore it because it's too complicated. And we say, well, if it will happen, then we will take you to court and think about it. And perhaps we will say you did what is needed. Perhaps we will punish you, etc. Now, let's imagine now it's a machine. It's a computer. What do? Punish the computer? What do? Destroy it, burn it? I mean, you cannot put there any rule that will tell it what to do. The same way we don't teach the people that come to get a license, a driving license, what to do in situations.
So we need more regulations and more laws as well, a new legal global AI order, isn't it?
No, it will not. It cannot be covered by more regulation. This is the problem. It's like, imagine yourself that you want to have kids and you have to get a license from the government to have kids, and you have to show to the government that those kids will never do any harm. Can you do it? I mean, I'm not speaking about you, about us. We cannot do it because it is an intelligent, the kid is an intelligent machine in a way, okay?
Let me bring in Cansu here and her opinion. Now, Cansu, of course, you run the AI Ethics Lab, and some of your clients include big corporations and companies. You advise them on how to integrate ethical AI into their ecosystems. What do you reply to Isaac? Do you agree with him? And what are some of the ethical aspects of AI that we really need to consider, and which are maybe some of the risks here?
Yeah, I think Isaac gave a great segue to what I do. And by the way, let me just add, we missed it in the introduction. I am also at the Institute of Experiential AI at Northeastern University, which is where my main work is right now. So like, let's put that also out there. We do the same thing. I do the same thing, work with the companies. So it's exactly this question that I'm working on, we are working on. So how do we think about the ethical questions within the structure of the AI system? So because AI is different, AI system is different from most other technologies in the sense that it can incorporate into itself, we can incorporate it into it value judgments, value trade-offs. I am going to disagree with the part that they are like kids. I think we have and we can have a lot more control on the AI systems as we are developing. If we want to, there can be ethical decisions and value trade-offs that are either programmed or safeguards that are around it. So I don't think it is like the responsibility gap between the developer and the AI system. I don't think it's as distinct as two distinct individuals like your kid and the parent. But the main thing to think about ethics, I think, is that there are ethical questions throughout the whole AI cycle, starting from the question of like, what kind of a project are you developing? What is its effects on the society? What are the value trade-offs in this AI system, in the old algorithm? What data set are you using? What type of data are you including? And who is using these systems? And you know, as you update these systems, what considerations are you taking into account? All of this includes all of these are AI ethics questions that cannot be answered. I agree with Isaac with code, ethics code or ethics regulation, but they are like puzzle solving questions. We answer them by analyzing these questions using ethical tools and technology tools and domain tools. If it is transportation, then questions related to urban planning, you know, how does self-driving cars affect cities and the lower socioeconomic groups that live in the cities? Like, you know, it doesn't end in the car. There are many other considerations here. And we have to answer questions. We cannot be lazy about this. If we are going to do this and do this well, we have to answer them one by one.
Now, we all agree that we are facing so many AI global challenges already on planet Earth. And now we even want to take AI to space, a process which is already underway, isn't it, Pierre-Philippe? And you are working at the European Space Agency exactly on that. Why is going to space to protect our planet so important? And what is the ESA doing to monitor Earth?
Okay, thanks, Martina. This is a very big question. I mean, it's mainly related to the power of perspective. When you change perspective on a problem, suddenly you gain much more understanding. So it's really funny that you need to go out of the Earth to better understand the Earth. But this is what happened because you get this global picture on our planet. You don't see the boundaries between countries, etc. You just see one system of the ocean, atmosphere, land. And you see how it interacts, how the ocean operates as part of this system, for example, to shape our climate. So this is why space agencies are launching satellites to monitor this. It started with weather in order to do weather prediction because everybody wants to know about weather, but it's now also about climate, deforestation, state of the ocean, pollution, air quality, you name it. So what ESA is doing is, in partnership with European Commission and industry, creating a monitoring system of our planet so that we really understand the state of our planet. It's like a doctor, an orbiting doctor, if you want, that measures some variables that tells you how it's doing, and that we give to scientists, to decision makers, in order to have a policy on sustainable development, for example. So we can measure some of the SDG. And we have this system called Copernicus with a family of Sentinel monitoring all the time for the next decade. So you are sure to get the data at about 10-meter resolution, for example, for optical sensor, but across the whole electromagnetic spectrum, measuring our planet. So like in a hospital when you do a scan. And that's where AI comes in, because it becomes a big data problem, different type of data, different physics of measurements. So you need to go and extract this information from these petabytes of data and to give the relevant information to decision maker. So we are training AI now on our data in order to do that. And the next step is to bring it from Earth to space, where you would do the inference, so that the satellite become extremely reactive. It's like if you were putting the brain just behind the eyes, so that you can make decision even faster. So we are working on this kind of issue in order to provide the right information at the right time, possibly to the right people.
reach out to me. I would be really eager to take part. Absolutely fascinating stuff. Now, you mentioned the word collaborations and partnerships. This is very important also when it comes to building AI ecosystems. Isaac, you have been a huge advocate for building these AI ecosystems. How should we go about this? What kind of partners are we looking for? I guess this transcends all geopolitical boundaries as well.
Well, it's not only geopolitical boundaries, etc. It's like any system. Any system in our life starts in kindergarten, not only with industry and in kindergarten. You in Israel, for example, I think we are the only country in the world until now in which, when we started our cyber revolution, 10 years ago, we decided to teach cyber in schools. Not in the universities. I mean, universities is done today by everyone. But in schools, the same with AI. You have, like we teach mathematics, you have to teach AI. Not everyone can write by himself code, software, etc. But everyone will need to know in coming future how to use it, what can be done with it and what not. I mean, it's a general remark. We speak about AI, and in our mind, we speak about primitive AI. I mean, the current situation today is not so much, I mean, still those intelligent machines cannot compete with human brain. This is the situation today. But when you speak about AI, this is not the final goal. I mean, we would like to have machines that will be as intelligent as us, and everything you ask me about AI, you can ask me about human intelligence, and then realize that some of the hopes that we have are not really can be fulfilled. It's not so simple. So the ecosystem should be like any ecosystem in our life, starting in kindergarten, schools, then industry, university. The plan I have submitted to the government about the AI revolution in Israel is to have AI lessons, for example, AI courses at the university in all the faculties. If you study computer science or engineering, you study how to write down algorithms. But if you study history or law or something like that, you need to know how to use AI to get advantage of modern technology, of reading a lot of data and analyzing it and pointing to things that you have not think before about and things like this.
Absolutely. Education is key. And I believe in China, they also started with AI classes and machine learning now at primary school level. It seems like Europe is lagging far behind, Pierre-Philippe. And I know from our discussion before this event today that you're really eager on nurturing talent as well. Is this talent already available in Europe, or what needs to be done to really bring more education to the children at a very young age already, and then of course up to university and postgraduate level and until the rest of our lives?
Okay, so I mean, I mentioned to you before, because one of my big challenges is to find talents, but this was already mentioned by previous speakers in other sessions. There is a race for talents these days. And I think Europe is very good in creating these talents. It's not often the best in keeping the talents in Europe. So that's why my call is to tell to these talents, please note there are like 15 petabytes of open and free data on the state of the planet, where you can create services, information, algorithms that help the planet to go towards a more sustainable future. There are very big opportunities there that can be business opportunities, because you cannot have a healthy economy without having a healthy environment. So monitoring this environment and turning this environment information into intelligence is really a key. So they are very interesting topic to work on with the tools you have. They are totally transferable to this. AI is totally agnostic for this. And it's much better than going and work for marketing or advertising, because you can really have an impact on the planet. So I think the potential is there. There are new curriculum coming up because we need this intersection of being a data scientist, but also a domain expert, because we will mention this, without the domain expert, you can do a lot of crazy things with AI. And I think we need to raise awareness to these communities about the beautiful and big challenge for planet that they can solve with their tools. So that's why I'm here, actually.
The responsibility and the pressure is obviously very, very high. Cansu, you have also often mentioned that it's important to teach ethical AI. So who do you think is responsible for that? What authority? Or is it society at large?
Well, let me connect it to the things that I said earlier. So I think I agree that the what we should be most concerned about the future of AI use is how our humans and AI system is going to collaborate. So having humans being able to understand and use these technologies is very important, but also having AI systems that are allowing this collaboration, being understandable, having providing the information that that a human can deliberate on, not just giving you a binary yes or no answer. These are very important things. So all of these go into the design of the AI system as well as education of the humans. And when we are talking about the ethics education, I think what we have to keep in mind is that, which is something that is often forgotten, is that ethics is a domain. Like the whole philosophy discipline is the one that is doing the ethics and that has all the tools about ethics. So when we add the ethics classes into computer science departments, for example, it should be people who are experts in ethics, who are philosophers, or those who have been working on this applied ethics domain should be the ones who are teaching it. And it's not so much about whose ethics is it, but more about what are the tools and theories and the literature that we can make use of as we are doing ethical reasoning and ethical analyses. So we shouldn't be giving people, here are the 5 ways of, rules of thumb that you can be ethical or create ethical technologies, but we should be providing individual students, currently employed technology people, with skills and tools where they can use to make ethical decisions. And once we have that, we are talking about a structure that is that can take into account and that should take into account, for example, different context of the question at hand, or different cultural contexts and so on. So it shouldn't be who is ethics. We should not get into that mistake.
Are taking AI into space with European Space Agency to also monitor climate change. Obviously, one of the biggest challenges of our generation and future generations as well. You mentioned to me previously that it's still a little bit of a wild, wild west out there when it comes to tackling climate change and the global warming from space. What are some of the trends that you're seeing maybe when it comes to AI and fighting climate change from outer space, and what can be done maybe also to use renewable energies to save some of the energy out there?
Yes, so climate change is obviously a problem which is global, so it's perfect to have a global monitoring to at least understand the impact of our species on our planet. It has also a component of adaptation, so you need to understand more or less, I wouldn't say in real time, but to see the trends so that people can adapt to future change and enable prediction. And then you have mitigation, so with technology like renewable, which, by the way, depends also on environmental parameters that you need to monitor. So for my specific, let's say, silos of applications for climate, the monitoring, adaptation, and mitigation is in fact supported by data. When you make decision, you need to have a data-driven approach on where you place the renewable energy, because if you place it where there is no wind, there is, of course, a big problem. So you need to make study. You can go back in the archive, look at the environmental impact. So all these, let's say, environmental intelligence decision can be supported by data. But to really understand all the correlation and patterns between this, you need technology like AI, because this is really where the machine is very good. It can see much beyond the human eye. It can correlate things that you wouldn't think about. But because the Earth is a system, it's very important to understand all these patterns, because if you touch the water here and then you have an effect on the forest there and you didn't see it, suddenly you can create something negative. So I see a lot of potential for, let's say, a kind of better understanding of this as a system, better prediction. We are building, together with partners again, a digital twin of the Earth in Europe, putting together all the possible data, IoT models, which is capturing the knowledge of the physics of the problem, and data from satellites in order to do experiments. What if scenario? If I do this policy, what is the impact in 10 years' time? Because we have only one planet, so we cannot do it on our planet and wait. By having a laboratory like this, we can enable, let's say, informed decision. And this is my hope, in fact. And that's where the intersection between AI models and observation is coming in. So I see a lot of potential there.
We only have about 1 Swiss minute to go, and we have to finish on time, obviously. I would like to wrap it up soon, but before we go, Cansu, you also mentioned privacy, trust are really, really important challenges when it comes to AI in 2022. What are some of the suggestions and proposals, ideas that you can come up with to really improve these areas as well?
Well, I'm gonna actually say something that is maybe not very expected in this question, but like I would say we should not really talk about trusting AI systems. So like I think in terms of thinking about what are we trying to put in place, we should remember and realize that we are talking about humans creating AI systems, so the trust should be on humans, the responsibility is on humans, which means if you're a CEO, if you're a developer, if you're an investor, whoever you are, you have the responsibility to deal with these ethical questions, at least try to make sure that you can mitigate them, and not talk about trusting an AI system. That is not that we know cannot be trustworthy.
And this wraps up our session really nicely. I would like to thank you, Cansu, Pierre-Philippe, and Isaac, of course, joining us from all over the world. And I wish you a great rest of the day. Happy New Year and Merry Christmas if you celebrate. And I look very forward to talking more about AI ethics and all the global challenges in 2022 and beyond. Back to you in the studio, Dalith.
Thanks a lot, Martina. Thanks for all of you, Cansu, Jean-Pierre-Philippe, and Itzik, to share with us all the insights. I also wish you all great festive seasons, stay healthy, and I'm looking very much forward to hopefully meet you all soon also in person. With that, we are going forward to our next session, and this will be a very special one. So see you soon and welcome Okezue. Now just give me a second because somehow something is not working the way it should. This time it's my own laptop. So here we go. This is probably always when I'm getting even much more nervous if I have to struggle with my own. So, as mentioned, now we have Okezue. And bringing him on stage is something that touches my heart. Being a mother of 2 young adult daughters, I always get touched when I see representatives of the young generation to come on stage. And this time we have the privilege to welcome Okezue Bell, an incredible, talented student who is an inspiration, likely not only for his own age group, but to anyone younger or older. Okezue, it is my great pleasure to have you with us today again and learn about what you think the expectations of the young generations are from US when it comes to the development of AI in the next years. Before we dive into the question, let me introduce you to the audience. So Okezue, on weekdays, you are a junior in high school. But before and after then, you are retrofitting the current protein supply chain for sustainable biotechnology and unaccepting of the way you measure biology, therefore designing new systems to enhance and revise the standard. Currently, you are focused on developing biocompatible human brain-computer interface. You are interested in functional computing and mathematics and their applications in human science data and the reverse application of organic bio-inorganic materials in computation and engineering. Besides doing sports and activities in various clubs, you also work on various side projects, belong to multiple organizations, primarily STEAM ones, work on consulting projects, and speak at conferences. By the way, Okezue had the honor to be at the Web Summit, actually, I think 2 months ago. Additionally, you also enjoy writing poems, short stories, and blogs. And reading your blogs is really phenomenal. And I would like to invite all of you out there, join Okezue's newsletter, register. We are sharing his webpage with you. But this is not all. Okezue is also playing violin and chess. Now, dear audience, I think this is just really great. And probably Okezue, in his only 15 years, did more than quite some of us in our life. Now, Okezue, before we're starting to deep dive in our interview, I think I would like to ask you to explain to our audience about your work on developing biocompatible human brain-computer interfaces. The stage is yours.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you so much for having me. So what's really interesting is that kind of like how we all have our phones as the main ways that we interface with technology or computers, etc. One of the new waves of technology is utilizing our biological information to directly interface with technology. So right now, the way we use our phones is through tactile experiences, right? So we feel vibrations from our phones, we click our phones, etc. But if we want more powerful and more precise modes of control, something that we can do is use our brains, for example, to actually control this information. And so all of our brains, whenever we're using our brains, our neurons are constantly firing. And essentially, our biology is really just a series of electrochemical reactions. So a lot of electricity is released, and we can measure that in hertz. And when we get those measurements, we can determine what our brain wants our body to do, or what our brain wants a certain device to do. And so when those certain signals are picked up, then we can start activating a different device. So, for example, I built a prosthetic, and one of the biggest things is how do we get these prosthetics to move in a way that the amputee would want them to. So what we can do is we can take the action potentials or the electricity generated by muscle movements in the amputee's residual limb, so the amount of their arm that they have left over or leg, and correspond those different readings of hertz to, you know, moving a finger on a prosthetic or moving the leg of the prosthetic and like flexing the wrist or something of that nature. And so it's just a really, really powerful technology, this brain-computer interface space. And what's so interesting is that we're starting to get something called human-computer interfaces now, where essentially it's not just the brain, it's literally any form of biology that can be mixed kind of with technology. And we call this in the AI space like biodigital AI. So we can model biological systems on computers. We can use biological systems to compute. For example, we can take a slime mold and make computers so much faster and so much more powerful, or model the behavior of a slime mold organism, which is able to communicate with other slime molds, model that on a computer, and we have an exponential increase in computing power. So one of the things I like to say is that nature kind of holds all of the secrets we need to solve some of the world's biggest problems. So it really just comes down to kind of leveraging that nature, which in this case is like biology and chemistry.
It's absolutely fascinating. and human interaction between the system will increasingly determine our lives. And listening to what you just said, where do you see the biggest impacts, let's say in the next 3 to 5 years?
Mhm. Yeah, I think some of the biggest impacts with this technology is cutting down a lot of the cost buckets and time buckets of general technology like diagnostics, especially in healthcare. There's a huge deficit in the speed at which we can, for example, diagnose a disease or perform a lab experiment. But with things like human computer interfaces, or just generally speaking, human centered interfaces, where we're literally accounting for human biology and trying to remodel that on different scales, we'll see so many increases in kind of speeds, etc. Like, for example, microfluidics is a huge space now where we're taking small volumes of liquid and, performing lab experiments on the micro scale. It's a lot faster, it's a lot cheaper, and it's portable. So all three of those things are kind of the hallmark of what makes a great diagnostic or a great lab experiment, to the point where it's reproducible many times and it's also extremely usable. And so we can apply this to various diseases, like we could use saliva to test for something like diabetes, for example, and just simple algorithms will be able to determine kind of what's the chemical composition of your saliva, and how does that correlate with your insulin levels or glucose levels, etc. And it's just super exciting to see kind of this era of interconnectivity where everything is getting faster, everything is getting cheaper, and so we're able to kind of disseminate these technologies to the people who need them most, like people in rural areas who can't afford prosthetics or diagnostics. So I think one of the biggest areas is definitely healthcare.
Okay, great. Because I can think, listening to what you said before, on one hand, I obviously always see the upside, the good side, like let's say the AI for good, how we can help people, disabled people, and to actually have a lot of great scaling up in the research in healthcare and all these things. But I can also imagine that quite some people are a little bit afraid of listening what you just said. And what does it mean to the population, and especially also for the young generation, with respect to the risks that we have within these developments?
Yeah, there are definitely a lot of regulatory aspects that need to be worked out. Like, for example, we're trying to generate human faces, human behaviors with AI, but deepfakes are a huge problem now. So people are kind of forging messages or forging what people have said. So there's definitely risk to AI. I would actually argue that there's risk to virtually any new technology that enters space that has the potential to have impact. So I think one of the biggest things is having the right people working in these areas. And so that's where a lot of young people come in, right? I like to say that we kind of have a moral high ground, in the sense that a lot of the problems that we're trying to solve, my generation didn't necessarily create, right? So we're going to face the worst effects of it, like climate change, all of these issues, overpopulation, etc. We're going to be facing the worst effects of it, but we weren't the creators of the issue. And so hopefully we kind of assume that moral responsibility, and we're able to use AI for good. And I think one of the biggest things to mitigate risk is really having a relationship with kind of all of the stakeholders in AI. So young people, older individuals, government individuals, etc. With things like COP26 happening, we're seeing reforms, we're seeing developments. But I think in order for it to really take effect, we need to have kind of a level of coalition and unity in the space, where we're having people of all backgrounds kind of helping to build up these systems. Because one of the things I like to say is, most of the best solutions don't necessarily come from the incumbents of the field. I think they typically come from the outsiders. Like, for example, I'm not necessarily like a PhD or a PhD student even, and I'm working on these technologies, developing solutions. So I think when you're outside of the field, you have kind of these unique insights. Like Elon Musk has founded a brain-computer interface company. He's founded a rocket company. Netflix exists, but it wasn't invented by an entertainer. So I think one of the biggest things is making sure that we have people of very diverse backgrounds involved in all of this technology, and from there we'll be able to create equitable and healthy solutions for everyone.
Thanks. I mean, we could go on for hours. I would like to shift the focus a little bit because time is running, and in our preparation we discussed about the human-computer interaction from a perspective that in future, actually perhaps even these days already, leaders needs to start to think about diverse team, actually to have a team out of human being together with, let's say, robots or systems, algorithms, cognitive algorithms. What is your view on that? On one hand, thinking of that in the future, when you be adult, to lead such a team, what does that mean to you?
Yeah, for sure. So I think the whole idea of human-like robotics kind of integrating with human beings is really interesting. I honestly think that while it's definitely a probable future, like for example, we might be in a workplace and we have a human-like robotic system, like kind of helping us pack up boxes or manufacturing systems, etc. I think that honestly, to that respect, it's going to be very collaborative. I don't think AI was invented to ever supplant someone's job or their function. I think it was meant to enhance it and make it more efficient. So while I definitely do think kind of the job landscape will change, like we'll need more engineers, we'll need more people who can operate robotic systems, etc. I still think at the same time we'll just see kind of the general or automatic work kind of just increasing exponentially in terms of speed and efficiency. And I also think that prospect is really important, that we're designing these systems to integrate with human beings, right? The world was built for human beings, or at least it was built mostly by human beings in terms of like the structures, maybe not the earth itself, but the structures that we've developed. And so if we're going to have structures that were made for humans, then why shouldn't our robots also be made for humans, right? And the best way to do that is to model them after human beings, because the world wasn't built for, hunks of metal to be walking around. It was built for human-like systems. So I think essentially by creating more systems like these, we'll be able to ensure kind of the safety and also the powerful aspect of the robotic systems. Yeah.
Great. I mean, I just can sign whatever you said. And it's one of the most important things that we're bringing in you, the young generation, more and more into the discussion. And this is something that I'm looking very much forward next year, 22, to have always kind of youngsters with us. And as we had last year, Okezue, like even a panel with all the young generation representatives. So whatever decisions are made about our digital future in the corridors of regulatory power around the world, we need to make sure that we put the best interest of the young generation first. So to wrap up our discussion, Okezue, please share with us what is your wish.
Yeah, I think my biggest wish is for collaboration and support and facilitation of, these future skills for young individuals. I think too often young people are kind of siloed into like, you must do science fair, you have to win awards first, then you go to college, you go to grad school. I think that we're too often defining a set path. Well, I personally still want to go to college and go to grad school and all of these things. I think that mold isn't conducive to kind of fostering innovation for young people. And so I think more people, like the people who have taken a chance on me, like at MIT Media Lab or at like Mass General, all these different people, I met them, I talked to them, and they didn't have to, but they decided to say, hey, let's give him a try. And I think having more of that and having more of these types of people, like just helping young individuals to get into the space early, is super important. And I think if that happens, we'll also see more driven individuals kind of rising up and taking up opportunities. And it doesn't just have to be in STEM, it can be in virtually anything. There's so many interlacing, like there are so many instances in which different fields kind of interlace with each other and work together really well. So I think if we're just trying to cultivate excellence in a variety of areas with young people, that'll be the most powerful thing. So if you have a job opening or if you have opportunities, internships, any way to kind of support young people, I think that you should definitely take a chance on them because it'll pay dividends in the future.
Perfect. Hey, dear audience, you've heard what Okezue said. Take a chance on the young generation because whatever decision we're taking, it's for their future. Thanks. It was great listening to you again. and I'm looking very much forward to have many more discussions with you, Okezue. Take care, stay healthy, have great festive seasons, say hello at home, and a great Happy New Year. Bye.
Thank you for having me. I love chatting with everyone. Bye.
Great, thanks. So that was really, really inspiring. And I'm always very much excited to have discussion with young people. And I promise you, dear audience, we will go on regularly having young, bright minds discuss with us, and we can learn a lot from them. So time is flying. We are already at our fourth and last panel discussion of the day that, for the first time, actually, I personally have the privilege to lead. On this panel, I'm happy to welcome Frida, Pascal, and Niels. They are here to wrap up the learnings of today and give a last overview on how they see the AI trajectory is developing from various perspectives. A warm welcome to all of you. Frida, you have a PhD and an MBA degree. You're an award-winning Harvard and MIT neuroscientist turned entrepreneur. You're CEO and co-founder of P-Metrics, which focus on making workforce decisions more accurate, fair, and efficient by using behavioral science and AI. By removing cognitive bias and improving job fit, you have been able to match hundreds of thousands of people with their ideal job for companies such as BCG and Kraft Heinz. Frida, we're highly appreciating your presence here today and looking forward to have your valuable insights. Then we have with us Pascal. You are a global expert in AI and automation and a pioneer in the field of intelligent automation. With your book, Intelligent Automation, you have become a bestseller author. You have published articles in Forbes, Bloomberg, McKinsey, sorry, and the Times. I definitely have to have another sip of water. You are a keynote speaker, lecturer, and tech influencer with more than 500 followers. You're a senior executive with more than 20 years of experience leading digital transformation with renowned firms such as McKinsey and Ernst & Young. You're currently at the leadership team of Era Technology, which makes smart business decision recommendations and actions autonomously. Pascal, we're truly inspired by your massive experience in the field of intelligent automation and are looking very much forward to benefit from your expertise. Thanks for being with us. Together with you, we have Niels on our panel. Niels, you're the CEO of Trendon, which you founded in 2002 and managed ever since. As a market leader for the trend research and innovation consulting in German-speaking countries, Trendon defines today's standards for targeted future orientation in a rapidly developing world with a view on markets, industries, and societies. With the help of the global active network La Futura, you bring together leading futurists and visionaries at an international level. And it was my great pleasure, actually, and honor to contribute to the last La Futura event that you did last month. I got to know your very valuable and interesting network. Niels, you set entering standards for multimedia-based journeys into the future with active audience participation with your journey into the future. Niels, now it's my pleasure to welcome you to our community. Now, before we start with the panel, I would like to share with you Kay's Firth-Butterfield statement, as unfortunately she got sick tonight and can't participate on this panel. Kay is head of AI and ML and member of the executive committee of the World Economic Forum. And because she can't be here with us, I'm going to share with you her statement. And in addition, we said that we're going to do an interview together next year and share that with all of you. So listen to Kay's statement. To engineer successful digital transformation with AI, companies must embrace a new approach to the responsible use of technology. To extract the benefit from AI while mitigating the risks, companies must ensure that they are sufficiently agile so they can adopt best practice to create responsible transformation with AI. To different degrees, all companies will need to become AI companies so they can leverage the considerable benefit to be gained through greater knowledge of their customers, explore new markets, and counteract new AI-driven companies that might seek their market share. The future of AI is more human. This is not because we should fear being replaced by machines, but that our unique human capacity for judgment and empathy and context can only be augmented. One of the problems with AI algorithms is that they are opaque. It is difficult to understand how they arrive at a decision. When Kay started working in this field in 2014, not many companies were thinking about AI ethics at that time. AI was all about producing the algorithms and making money. However, now companies are beginning to understand that ethical AI should be a component of the work they are doing. Without it, there is a potential danger to their brand and value. So that was Kay's statement. Now to you, dear panel. To kick off the panel, I would actually like to ask you all one question, because you're all in the area of trend, of future. Now, if you think, to what extent your trend prediction from 5 years ago applies to today's state? Frida, may I start with you?
Sure. I actually think a trend prediction that I was made 5 years ago is that the move to AI and the move to more automated systems can actually help with a lot of data questions that we previously didn't have great answers to. And what I mean in our space in creating employment algorithms, it's very important to be tracking things like bias. Bias actually is quite difficult for a lot of human capital management systems to track prior to the advent of more AI-driven systems. So much as, even though I think the public in general fears AI as a concept and a technology that will embed bias and make it more prevalent, on the flip side, I actually think ML and AI technologies can be better at mitigating and tracking bias. So that's a prediction that I think was true 5 years ago and remains true today.
Thanks a lot. Niels, may I hand over to you?
I do foresight since 20 years, so trying to anticipate the future and to help clients to understand what the trends are. And we know we always like overestimate the near-term trends, and we always underestimate the long-term impact. So don't get nervous. Really try to work with trends on a strategic way and build up like scenarios for different futures, build up your own desirable future, work with trend radars as a company to have really like a strategic tool to master the future. And 10 years ago, it was exactly in June 2011, we anticipated the metaverse. So as I said, we cannot predict the future, but we anticipated a world where people are immersed into, where a new kind of internet style 3D and a new economy also will arise. And we presented it on a conference in Chile with over 2,000 participants. And I found this 2 weeks ago when like Mark Zuckerberg like announced the metaverse like 2 months ago to his colleagues. And that was like a nice surprise, exactly 10 years ago. So I think this could be my best prediction.
Okay.
But as you know, you cannot predict the future. It's impossible. It's really like it's strategic future management.
Absolutely. So coming to you, Pascal, this is also one of your core competences. What is your view on that?
I agree with Niels. We always overestimate the near future and underestimate the future that is longer term. I will just give an example here. And I will only refer to 10 years ago. 10 years ago, we were all scared about losing our jobs against technology. Same thing as 200 years ago, by the way. And today we all have great jobs, and unemployment has never been as low as today. And 10 years ago, we even didn't know Uber. And today, more than 3 million people are Uber drivers. So just to show how the world is changing and how technology is bringing us to another level and providing us good surprises.
Thanks. We will come later on to the future. Would like to stay with you quickly, Pascal. You shared a post on LinkedIn this morning about survival deviation. When you look the overall transformation that organizations going through, where do you see attention is going, and where do you think it should?
I tend to agree with what Kay was saying a few when it is about AI. I tend to agree with what Kay was saying. That we've always been, and we tend all to be focused on one thing, which is the performance of technology. When do we reach general artificial intelligence, for example? That's where all the investments are going and all the attention is going. While we all know that AI is built by people and for people. And if we don't think first about people, if we don't put people at the center of all this, it's just wasting efforts, in my view, because, yeah, the purpose of AI is to serve people.
Okay. Now, I would like to come to you, Frida, and I would like to bring this a little bit more now to the perspective of the future, based on your views from the standpoint of P-Metrics, the Washington Post and the World Economic Forum. What do you see as a dominating trends when it comes to cognitive technology in business?
Sure. I think that, that means a lot of different things to different people. But if we take the idea that, some sort of cognitive technology is how can we take the good behind human cognitive processes and potentially try to mitigate the downside. I always think of, we call it bias mitigated AI, but essentially it's artificial intelligence that has been dual optimized for performance and also lack of bias. And I equate it to CRISPR, which is, CRISPR takes, genomic segments that are causing disease and eliminates them. I actually think that with artificial intelligence and bias mitigation techniques that exist, you can take the best of what humans have to offer in terms of cognitive processes, and yet eliminate some of those very thorny challenges like bias, which unfortunately are an inherent sort of evolutionary component of the human mind that is going to be impossible to remove from the actual brain, but is possible to mitigate when we try to replicate cognitive processes using artificial intelligence.
Niels, thinking of the prediction now, of actually anticipating the future, it's not really about the predictions. I would like to have a view now on the industries, and coming back then to what you said, Frida, and working more at discussing more about the human and the talents. Which industries, where do you see the hottest trends, or which industry will be actually affected the most in the near future?
First of all, as you know, I'm working mainly with companies in Germany, Austria, and Switzerland. And what they do at the moment is really investing in digitalization. And so this is like they are doing their homework of the last 30 years. So the internet is out there for over 30 years now, and they still, like a bad pupil, like a bad pupil still sitting there doing the homework from yesterday. And they have to do so much digitalization, cybersecurity, and all this IoT homework they didn't do the last year. So they do not have really time for AI. So when you ask 200 managers in German big corporates and industry, they say they all focus on cybersecurity now. Cybersecurity is like the new digitalization. They all focus on IoT to connect the devices, but they do not have really resources to focus on the next wave now, the AI wave, which is about like smart factory, digital twins, predictive analytics, edge AI, autonomous systems. Of course, we have some big corporates in Germany, of course, in the mobility, automobile sector. They also focus on autonomous driving and so on. But I think it could be better, yeah. And I think the biggest trends in AI should really focus now, and all the industries should focus on smart production, smart machines. This is really important for Germany, Austria, Switzerland, because we are like global masters in building machines, and now we should focus on building smart machines and smart factories and like light out factories where you don't have humans anymore, where the machines do the work, so you don't need to switch on the light anymore, where it's about AI for sustainability, because there is a huge pressure for AI for sustainability, smart energy grids, circular economy, digital twin of the earth, of the factory to analyze and optimize. And I think this would be like the two biggest trends, like AI in industry and AI in sustainability. And actually all industries are affected. It doesn't matter if you have automotive or energy or health. AI is like what you said, DNA. It's like DNA, yeah? So AI should be part of the DNA in all companies, and this starts with the top management.
Absolutely. Do you, Pascal, I mean, you have more the global view. Do you agree? Can you adapt that globally, or where do you see their differences?
I think yeah, from my experience traveling internationally, I've lived and worked for 10 years in Europe, then lived and worked for 10 years in Asia, and now in the US, in San Francisco. I can share a bit of perspective around this. I think in Asia, companies are, the newborn native digital, so they are very they want to embrace these new technologies, and they want to take all the benefits from them. In Europe, we are a bit more traditional, I would say. Based on our history, we'll take a bit more time. It's got to be longer to adapt, longer to change ourselves because of the legacy and because of the inertia as well of all we've created over the centuries. And US on the other side is really where the investment is, in my view, is booming. With culturally people who are ready to take risks and challenges and yeah, ready to fail as well. So that's how I see. Yeah.
Yeah, we've heard that.
So that, and then you have, so those are the trends, but then you have the size, and the size. Even though Asia is going fast and really willing to embrace all this, it's very small compared to the US, which is the largest. In the world.
Absolutely. But I mean, thinking of that, we're talking now actually about the business side, and as mentioned before, I really want to get then also to the human aspects. But before that, Frida, what are the aspects of AI that are most compelling to the business?
Yeah, I mean, there are many aspects, I think, that are compelling to the business. And I think, I heard Eric Brynjolfsson, who is an economist now at Stanford, talk at the World Economic Forum 2 years ago. And he basically said that, AI systems are now ready to be adopted. They're here, they're ready to be adopted. If we were to adopt broadly these systems, a lot of the productivity gains that we haven't seen in terms of, you know, broad productivity gains in the economy would actually be realized. And the challenge is not that these systems can't bring, you know, productivity gains, efficiency gains, fairness, like in the world of employment, gains in terms of bringing a more diverse workforce into the company. The challenge, honestly, is human change management processes that is really, I think, unfortunately, standing in the way. And I hear this all the time, and I find it, you know, both interesting and frustrating that, you know, humans, unfortunately, for a variety of different reasons, and we're all humans on this panel, you know, fear, I think, the adoption of new technologies. And so I would say that businesses can clearly see how these technologies can bring, you know, again, more efficiency, more automation, more human value, actually, in the case of employment. But unfortunately, there is this human change management process that is, you know, sort of creating a lot of friction. And so I think if we want to think of ways in which we can advance the cause of artificial intelligence, I think we have to think of how we can sort of address these change management processes.
Absolutely, and addressing this change management processes and especially the challenges, this takes a lot. How much, I mean, we have the seek of talents on one hand. On the other hand, we do have people are afraid of losing their job. And I think, Niels, you mentioned it at the beginning that, yeah, I mean, this is one of the things that always happened in the past also, that certain jobs got redundant. On the other hand, we have a lot of new jobs. So this is just a fact of industrial revolutions. But from a talent perspective and the trend perspective, how much, Pascal, how much does that correlate, and how much are we able actually to anticipate or here even perhaps predict what kind of jobs will we need in the future, will be developed in the future to be able to meet the trends that we are facing in the next years?
Yes, I completely agree with Frida in the sense that a successful AI means a successful connection between AI and people. So it's two ways to this connection. One is on that side. On one side, it's AI, and AI needs to be people focused in the sense that it has to allow people to understand it, to trust it, to work with it the best as easy as possible. And on the other side, you have people, and people need to get ready to use AI. And to get ready to use AI and to succeed with AI, not only they need to know how to use it and how to embrace it, they need also to adapt their skills to it. And the way to best adapt our skills to the technology is to be complementary with technology, basically. And so the question comes, what can technology do that we can do? And here we can think of creativity, we can think of relationship with others, we can think of critical thinking. And I think those three components are the key components of the future, where we really work on our competitive edge, on our complementarity with technology. And I strongly believe that this is where education should go. I mean, when I'm thinking of my two kids, this is what education should give them before any skill that is technical or anything else.
Absolutely, and I think education is key. This is also one of the things that we've heard in the last panels and discussions. If I'm listening to you, and I'll be a bit provocative now, what are actually, if we're talking about what are the biggest risks associated with AI, Niels? Is it probably also the human being itself?
First, I want to agree with Pascal. We always agree on this panel, and it's about really focusing on the core competences of human beings, like creativity, empathy, relations, and but it's not only about our kids. I also have 3 kids, but I think it's about our leaders, and they must be aware what AI can do, not only in technology, because as Germans, we always look at the technology, but and not only on the customer perspective to create customer value, but also on the business models. And this is very, very difficult for our leaders here to understand this correlation between AI technology, customer value, and business models. And so we really need to educate not only our kids, but also our leaders. If you take a look at the top management boards of all the DAX companies, they don't have an idea of AI. They don't have an education. They all studied like business or other things, but they don't have this background on building AI future business models. And so I think it's about our kids and about our leaders to educate them, make them future ready.
Absolutely.
And what are the biggest?
Yeah, exactly. I just want to say, like, educating the kids. So there is also something that comes out from the human being. So is it perhaps really that the human being is kind of the biggest obstacle in this whole system?
Always.
I like short answers, but that was too
Well, and
short. Frida?
Well, can I just make a follow-up comment? I mean, I think, look, it's people resist change, right? I mean, so when the one of my favorite stories is when the the locomotive engine was first introduced. Women were advised not to ride on it because it went so fast that their uteruses could fly out of their bodies, right? So I think that there's always this, you know, sort of unfortunate fear, right, that these new technologies will somehow lead to these catastrophic consequences. And then I would say that in the case of AI, you know, there have been unfortunate implementations of the technology, at least in our space, that have actually validated some of these concerns, right? And again, you can chalk it up to sort of early initiatives and also, you know, media bias for, you know, alarming headlines. But the point of the matter is, I think there is evidence out there to suggest that some of the things people fear could actually come to pass. So I think it's a tricky situation. I don't think we should fully blame human beings because we're looking at the data and saying, well, you know, there's some cause for concern. On the flip side, I think there's a lot more positive that could come out of these systems, you know, in particular, if there's some guardrails or constraints put around the way these systems are developed. So it's a difficult situation. I don't think we can just say, well, humans are Luddites and don't get it. I think, you know, it goes beyond that. It's more complicated.
Now, to wrap up the whole thing with one sentence, a takeaway for our audience, what would you say is what we should focus, be aware of to anticipate the next, let's say, only 3 to 5 years? Frida, may I just start with you?
Sure. I think we're going to see a lot more safeguards and governance and potential regulation in some of these areas. It's already happening in the EU. And I think we're going to see that those, you know, those frameworks are going to differ tremendously by geography. I don't think Asia and you know, the EMEA region and the US are going to necessarily have similar perspectives on these governance frameworks. So I think it's going to start getting tricky for AI developers.
Thanks. Pascal?
Just one simple sentence. Let's all work together to make our world more human with AI.
Merci beaucoup. Niels?
You were also asking about the biggest risks. We didn't came to this point. And I think the biggest risk is that we invest trillion in AI technology. And we should more invest in AI ethics and AI for social and AI governance. So it's not only the technology we should invest in, like building more governance and ethics and understand what the impact of AI in terms of deep fake and autonomous weapons and things like this have. So this would be important for 2025, invest more. And also Pascal talked about like super intelligence. I think before we reach the super intelligence or the artificial general intelligence, we have something called like a broader intelligence. So now we have narrow intelligence.
We lost you, Niels.
Image classification. Sorry?
We just lost you quickly. You're back again.
Okay. I said that Pascal was talking about artificial general intelligence and super intelligence. And I think before we reach this point, which would be super exciting, of course, we will have a level between, which is broader intelligence. And because now we are at a narrow intelligence, we have hoovering robots, we have, and the broader intelligence will be using new hardware like neuromorphic computing, quantum computing, will use new kinds of algorithms like auto machine learning, meta machine learning, and generative algorithm networks. And I think there will be the next 3 to 5 years, we will more see bigger investments in broader intelligence.
Okay, thanks a lot. Time is over. It just passes so fast. Thanks a lot, Frida, Niels, and Pascal. I think we could go on and on and on. And at least I have the great pleasure to meet you all again next year. And I hope that you will come on stage again. Thanks a lot for sharing your view on the trend on AI. Take care and have a great festive season.
Fantastic.
And a happy new year.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Take care. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Now we are actually almost at the end of our agenda. And normally here we're wrapping up. But before I'll do a short wrap up about the last 3.5 hours almost, we do have a great and an honorable keynote of Dr. Kai-Fu Lee. Now, due to this extensive, stressful time, he was open enough to do a speech, especially to share today with our Swiss cognitive community. So, my dear audience, it is a pre-recorded one because we haven't found the time slot for him to come and be here live in person, or actually streamed. So first of all, thanks a lot to Kai-Fu Lee for sharing his video with us. I would like to introduce you to him for those who are not familiar with the details. Dr. Kai-Fu Lee is the chairman and CEO of Sinovation Venture and president of Sinovation Venture's Artificial Intelligence Institute, a lab for building AI talent and promoting AI engineering and research. Dr. Lee was the president of Google China and senior executive at Microsoft, SGI, and Apple. He has over 50 million followers on social media and is the author of 7 best-selling books, with the most recent New York Times bestseller, AI Superpowers. Dr. Lee received his bachelor degree from computer science from Columbia University, PhD from Carnegie Mellon University, as well as honorary doctorate degree from both Carnegie Mellon and the University of Hong Kong. He is the co-chair of AI Council for the World Economic Forum Center for the Fourth Industrial Revolution and fellow of the Institute of Ethical and Electronics Engineering, Times 100 in 2013, and Weird 25 Icons. Reading out only on fraction of his biography, seriously, I could not think of a better person right now to wrap up this event or even 2021 for us. Dear audience, we are happy to share Dr. Lee's keynote recorded, dedicated to the Swiss Cognitive Global AI community, and you will be also able to have it in the recorded version later on. So please welcome with me Dr. Lee in his.
So for the next part of my talk, I'm going to move to what's next. So in my book, AI 2041, I talk about a number of new trends. So here I pick 6 of the many trends I predict as an extrapolation of what I've spoken about so far. I've talked so far about what AI can do to date. And now I'm going to talk about AI going forward up to 20 years. The first one is going to be understanding of language. And once you understand language, you can play a big role in businesses. And interestingly, computers were able to see first and then learn language later. Perhaps seeing is easier, just like babies learn to see first before they learn to understand and talk and listen. I think on the surface, computers, AI really began to see well in 2014. That was when AI beat human performance in an image recognition task. And that's on the top illustrated here. And the theory here is that when AI beats people on a fundamental task, that of seeing and recognizing, then applications should blossom. And indeed it has. So that has turned into a lot of applications, including some controversial ones like facial recognition, but also using recognition for autonomous stores, use recognition in factory visual inspection, the use of vision in various types of robots, and the use of computer vision in autonomous vehicles. Also, it can be used offline, not with live objects, but it can be used to do photo editing. Smart, you've probably noticed a lot of photo editing and video editing software improved. It's because of AI. In fact, when you use an Apple iPhone and do a portrait mode picture, it is in fact using computer vision. It's recognizing you and then cutting you out, putting in the foreground, blurring the background and painting it behind you. And that requires computer vision to do that accurately and naturally. And of course, it can be used to do bad things, like deep fakes are also based on computer vision technologies. So as an investor, which is my daytime job, we saw the 2014 breakthrough and we decided, hey, we're going to really make a bet on computer vision taking off with all these applications. And that has led to a lot of successful investments for us. But what has happened is that in 2020, history repeated itself as AI beat humans in terms of reading comprehension. And that's a pretty tough task. That is asking an AI algorithm to read any passage and then be asked any question and is able to give you an answer. That's a pretty tough task. And believe it or not, as of last year, AI has beaten human. So once that is done, that can become the basis for a much higher accuracy in speech recognition, machine translation, which are products that exist today, but they'll work so much better. They might be below acceptability threshold today, but they'll be above acceptability soon. And it can be used in question answering. You can ask all kinds of questions. In fact, Google already has pretty accurate question answering capabilities embedded in the search. I bet you probably just haven't asked it the question. So to understand the power of this natural language, try asking a full question to Google next time. It can also be used in targeted advertising. Imagine if today a typical commercial generates one single message to try to brand or sell your product. Maybe in different magazines, it would use different messages to cater to the audience, but always just in a few categories of main customer audience. But when you have this natural language ability, imagine if you can synthesize an answer. And once we have that, we can elevate ourselves from just having big data and to move towards a smart business intelligence. And these can be business processes and decision-making that's powered by AI, assisting CEOs make really big decisions. So when you make a big decision, let's say at a knowledge or insight level, if you're in a question answering mode, you might ask the system, if Suez Canal is clogged for another 2 weeks, what stocks should I buy and sell from my portfolio? That's a question you would typically ask an analyst, but now AI can answer the question. And also, it might gain enough insight to directly push to you to say, hey, Kai-Fu, have you thought about investing in this kind of company because of that event? So it's even better than a search engine. It suggests to you and reminds you without you ever asking it anything. There's a lot of details here that I won't go into, but I've mentioned some key applications, and this is something one of the companies we invested in has built, that this foundational model can make a very accurate machine translation if you know what domain it's in. In the middle one, you see copywriting, the example I gave you about how to sell a Tesla to Kai-Fu or to anyone. In a targeted, individualistic market copywriting for that person, knowing what you know about that person. And then on the last part are more of a financial engine in which you can really understand what's happening around the world and ask questions and get up-to-minute updated answers. The example I gave about Suez Canal. So I think increasingly as this technology advances, there will be industrial applications as well as consumer applications that will essentially enable a conversational robot. It still might be text, it might be on your phone, it might be like a chat window, or it might be speech interface, or it might be a virtual digital human on your screen, or it might actually one day be a full robot. But whatever it is, because it's really gained some mastery of the human language, it's able to converse with us, have a dialogue with us. It feels like the dialogue is reasonable, and it helps us get our job done. We can ask it questions. So this will really elevate the capabilities of intelligence when AI starts to master language. I should also clarify that the fact that it appears to have a mastery of language doesn't mean that it fully understands. It's merely able to very intelligently map what you said against a gigantic repository of what it knows. It doesn't really understand language the way that we do, the way that we can have emotive responses and create connection between people and draw very vague analogies and truly understand every type of humor. It's not quite that, but for kind of business interactions or personal agent kinds of things, I imagine there would be very close to having very smart personal assistants that are perhaps like your secretary or your junior entry-level analyst in the work that you do, the people that could find answers for you and solve problems for you without extreme business complexity, that I imagine that AI will be able to do that in the 20-year time frame. The second key point I want to predict is in the transportation area. We all talk about a lot autonomous vehicles. So when will they come about? So my prediction is that L5 capability that is fully autonomous, no steering wheels in the car, can go anywhere to anywhere. That capability of driving is probably about 20 years away. But that doesn't mean we have to wait that long to sit in an autonomous vehicle. In fact, we can sit in one right now. Lower left-hand side shows you a robo minibus. And that one is in deployment today on special routes. But next year, it will be in full deployment in 3 cities in China. And the key thing to recognize is, while to a human, driving a bus seems like a challenging task, maybe even more than driving a car because it's bigger. But to an AI, driving a bus is so much easier because buses drive on fixed routes, typically in large, well-paved roads. And you can also choose cities that have decent weather. That it doesn't have to do with edge cases like a baby crawling across the street. What do? Is it a baby or is it a puppy? Can you tell? Well, because AI learns from data, and no autonomous vehicle has data with baby versus puppies crossing the road. So how is it ever going to learn that? So doing buses. And in fact, before that, doing highways is a very good way to collect data, gain practice, and then the data makes the system better, and so on. And also, the robo-bus doesn't have to deal with very tiny roads, windy roads in the mountains. It doesn't have to deal with what happens if there's a natural disaster that causes a small road in the countryside to not be able to see the street signs, or maybe the pavement has been broken due to an earthquake. So what about all these cases? Well, if you're in big cities and you're operating in large paved roads and you're driving fixed routes to maybe just 50 places, 50 fixed stops, then that is much easier. So the phase one, maybe the next 10 years, will be increasingly more difficult environments in which autonomous vehicle is applied all the time, gaining data and improving itself and getting uploads. If you've seen some reports on the Tesla summoning feature, you would know that when Tesla first launched this feature, it's just the capability of having your parked car find you. It's very clever, but when they first launched it, it didn't work out all that well. But as they accumulated more and more data, it began to work extremely well. So that shows how powerful that data collection and then the auto update that Tesla sent out to be very, very critical. So that's kind of phase one, the next 10 years. And then after that 10 years, getting into work on robo-taxis, getting people comfortable with passing laws, ensuring the casualties are better than today, can take a long time. That's why I estimated maybe 20 years, maybe even longer. One thing that can make it faster is smart cities and smart highways. Imagine if the road starts communicating with the car that says, you're swerving off the road, be careful. Then the car can self-correct. Or maybe the road can say, the transmission on the road can tell the car, there's an accident up ahead. You can't see it, but slow down, be careful. So essentially, we're turning the current signs on the street from those telling people, human drivers, what's happening or what to do, to signals that tell the cars what's happening and what to do. And when you turn signals native in the car's language, it can, of course, appreciate it better than reading human signs. Furthermore, cars will be able to talk to each other. One car could say, oh, I just blew a tire, so be careful around me. That could be saving lives just by that broadcast. And one car can tell another, where I'm in a hurry. The person in my car needs to get to where he needs to get to in a hurry. Please get out of my way, 10 cents. And then the other car might say, no, I want $1. Then they negotiate, and then they give the right of way. So that could happen as well. And also, cars will be able to negotiate their exact path so that they barely miss each other by one centimeter. And humans won't be able to do that. So in 20 plus years, humans will slowly feel that we are unsafe to ourselves. The biggest danger to ourselves is not the autonomous vehicle, but our poor ability to drive. And then eventually people won't be allowed to drive on highways and perhaps all the roads. That will be beyond 20 years, but it's coming. Once we are able to deliver very capable autonomous vehicles, that can be the next operating system after Windows and Android, because you can use that same capability, the multi-sensor fusion, the AI deep learning capabilities, the real-time processing, integrating knowledge of everything in your environment, recognizing who's moving, what's moving. Those very capabilities that make autonomous vehicles work are the same things we need for robotics. So great robots will come after that as well. And we've all heard about using space travel to go up in space and then come down as a faster way to go from, say, London to Tokyo. The third area is a big one. It is probably the area that will make the biggest difference applying AI to healthcare. The reason is quite simple. It is the fact that healthcare is in the process of digitizing, and AI feeds on data, and healthcare is now digitizing everything. Healthcare records, radiology, pathology, data from our wearables, and data from multiomics, genetic sequencing and the like, blood tests. All of that are incredibly valuable data. That's basically the same as when I gave you the example of all the data about my income and house and so on whether I deserve a loan. This is data to determine whether you're ill or how to become healthier. So all this data collected for people longitudinally over years, if not decades, can be tremendous, not only in improving the quality of diagnosis and treatment. Imagine now individualized treatments. We're all used to everyone getting sick, getting the same treatment. And if a drug doesn't work, maybe we try another. Maybe there's a second defense. But now that we can collect all this data, we can determine maybe for some illnesses, different people with different history may be more efficaciously treated with different types of treatments. So this is called precision medicine, gives different treatment to people, really leveraging the big data and the individuality of treatment of healthcare. And beyond diagnosis and treatment, monitoring, long-term care, prevention are all great ways to use this data. And once this is done, we can see applications everywhere from imaging, drug discovery, to many, many applications. I'll mention 4 quickly now. One is, I'll just start from the upper right, in pathology. People really are not the ideal species to do pathology because we can't see all the images very clearly. We can't integrate all the knowledge. We can't compare with all the people. And in fact, in certain types of diagnosis, AI is already beating humans, for example, in sicknesses related to the eye. And this will just continue and improve. A second area on the upper left is AI drug discovery. This is using, for example, DeepMind's protein folding to do the protein folding to begin with, followed by, for example, using AI to help find a target on which to attach a molecule, which is the drug, and then to discover which molecule is most likely to work. One of the companies we invested in, called In Silico Medicine, has actually used this approach with human supervision, but AI discovery to discover drugs for 2 illnesses. One is pulmonary fibrosis, and the other is kidney fibrosis, both almost untreatable, now becoming treatable. And the most exciting thing is what AI is doing is not smarter than people. It's just helping to reduce the scope and the size and help make discovery faster because it eliminates unlikely candidates and lets the human scientist hone in on the right drug faster. So the real outcome is that the human scientist's productivity increases and is able to perhaps discover a drug 3 to 4 times faster and maybe 10 times cheaper. And what this means is that currently pharmaceuticals are not willing to invest in drugs for rare diseases because it could cost $2 billion for such a drug discovery. And because it's a rare disease, it won't pay for its R&D. But if we are able to reduce the cost by a factor of 10 by using AI tools to help the scientists, we can now go after rare diseases, and that will help us live healthily as well. On the lower left is autonomous robots. We all know about a company called Intuitive Surgical. It is currently still operated by a doctor remotely, and it does certain types of surgery. In the future, as robotics become finer and finer motor skills and accuracy and autonomy, it will gradually move from human operated to human delegate to parts of it to let AI operate. As an example, You might argue the surgery itself is too important. The surgeon should do that. But what about suturing, right? Sewing the patient up, that is almost like a sewing machine. Probably the robot can do a better job. So why not delegate parts of the surgery to robots? And then that will reduce the stress and workload on the surgeon, allowing the surgeon to treat more patients. That's a great thing. And then eventually, some surgeries will be potentially performed fully by robots under surgeons' care and direction. And that probably is around the 20-year time frame, assuming the various laws support that. So these are some of the exciting ideas. One of the more recent ideas I want to briefly mention is, can AI help us live longer and healthier? And I'm personally using a technology that is in a company we invest in called Deep Longevity, that takes, in fact, all of our data, multi-omics, blood, and radiology data, to identify the attributes of aging and tell us what we should do to slow down the aging, or in some cases, even reverse the aging effect. And the advice it gives can be related to your diet, it might be related to exercise or sleep, or it might be introducing some medicine and nutrients. And of course, this is all supervised by a doctor who will tweak the recommendations. And I've been on this regimen for about a year, and I am watching my blood become healthier and healthier. In fact, it's about 6 years healthier than it was 1 year ago. So by some metric, I might be 5 years younger now. The fourth area is in robotics. I believe the advances in robotics are happening, and in China is in particular driving it because China is the world's factory and has a strong incentive to lower the cost of producing goods, because Chinese labor costs are going up compared to countries like India, Vietnam, and Brazil. So in the area of autonomous transport, moving things, we are seeing forklifts to be the lowest hanging fruit, followed by moving things outside, followed by trucks, followed by buses, followed by cars, all along collecting more data, enabling the next more difficult scenario. We've kind of covered that under transportation. But in industrial, it's something similar. We want to go after the low-hanging fruits. And in a factory, the human capability being used from simplest to hardest are using our eyes for visual inspection. Is the t-shirt proper size or not, proper color or not? Then moving things around, kind of like forklifts, but also in this example, you see a watering robot in a farm. The third case is a picker, something that can pick merchandise up. Imagine using it in Amazon's warehouse. And then the fourth example is a fancy finger that can actually pick up very delicate objects, in this case, an egg yolk. And that could be applied to more cases of picking. And then the last case is autonomous flying with a drone. So all of these are enabling cases that will potentially make manufacturing, the production process much more efficient, replacing parts or all of human labor. And this will be further advanced as robots become self-replicating, self-maintaining, as 3D printing starts to take off, and also manufacturing can be extended to homes to be built in modules, can be extended to energy in terms of making battery and solar panels, can be extended to materials as new ways of producing goods that are constructed by scientists one molecule at a time. So number 5 is going into the energy and agricultural space, that they become manufacturing driven. So first on energy, one of the biggest breakthroughs in the last 10 years is that the cost of solar and lithium battery have been reduced by over 80%. And they will be reduced by another 80% or so in the next 10 years. And if we're looking 20 years, they might be reduced by 90% to be 1/10 of what it is today. That by then, these will be indisputably the lowest cost energy source for the world. And they can be enhanced by wind energy, potentially hydrogen, and certainly there's electrical grid to back them up. One of the interesting ways and problematic ways of using this type of new energy, while it is clean, is that the solar panels can collect energy from the sun when it's during the day, and then that energy is used, but also stored in a battery, which can be used at night. And hopefully the storage is good enough for use in 365 days a year. But there are many problems. One, of course, is what if the battery isn't enough? Well, then we have to back up to the current electrical grid. The other issue is this energy cannot be arbitrarily transported from one house to another, or one city, certainly not from one city to another. So they have to be used on the spot or near the spot that you collect. So they'll be distributed. So we imagine the right solution for the human race is over the next 10 to 20 years, really place a lot of these distributed combination of solar energy and improved batteries. They might not be based on lithium anymore. There will be new types of batteries by then, and material improvements are coming. So if this distributed storage, it could cost trillions of dollars globally to build this out, but if this were built out, we would enjoy energy at something like 1/10 the cost of today. They will be basically clean. They can be used for all kinds of tasks, because once you have almost free energy, you have almost free water, because you can do desalination as a manufacturing process. And the exciting thing for all of us is that this turns the energy problem from a natural resource problem into a manufacturing problem. We're no longer relying on certain countries that have oil or other natural resources, the haves and have-nots problem. Every country can either manufacture or buy equipment manufactured by other countries to produce for its energy at a fraction of the cost. So this is quite an exciting revolution. It's not exactly AI, but AI can and will be used in the storage, transport of the energy, can be used in designing the energy consumption to minimize it. It can be used in the design of the new material. So there's AI in places, but largely this is an energy revolution. And manufacturing isn't just going to be useful to produce the new energy source, but it can be used for in agriculture, in the future of vertical farming, and also in 3D printed food. We can now grow meat from stem cells, so we can actually grow a piece of beef without ever hurting the animal. And also in the future, we can have new kinds of meat and vegetables that we've never had through the technology of synthetic biology. So this is, again, turning production of food into one from agriculture, which depends partly on the weather, but into one that's manufacturing, making it predictable and also lower cost through quantity production. The last point I want to talk about is to further go into the materials revolution. We've already kind of covered the advances in synthetic biology. The biggest advance there is CRISPR, and CRISPR is a way to do gene editing. And gene editing allows us to potentially make new types of organisms. And it can be used, for example, to turn a worm into a fertilizing worm by editing its gene. And we've already talked about how we can grow meat on a petri dish. and we can use it for drug and therapy discovery. And we can actually use this synthetic biology to create many more materials, rubber, cosmetics, fragrances, fashion, fabrics, not from chemicals, but built one molecule at a time. So this will be good for the planet, and it essentially also turns more things into a manufacturing problem and a manufacturing opportunity. So if we combine these three things together, we are looking forward to an age of plenitude. This is probably not 20 years, it might be 40 or something like that, but as the cost of energy plummets, the cost of materials drop, and the cost of production also goes to a very low number, from using people labor to using autonomous robots. This will move us closer to what I call plenitude, which means we have enough, because the cost of goods will have dropped enough that we should be able to come close to eradicate hunger and poverty, providing decent living for all of the human race. And that's something the human race has been trying to do for millennia. And finally, I think we can see we're close to it. AI plays a role, but other technologies also play a role. Of course, this assumes there's well intention by the people, that companies don't get greedy and they actually try to make this lower cost goods available to all. So there are many more predictions in my book, AI 2041. I won't go into these. I will close on a few points that people might wonder about. So I think AI will be able to, while AI cannot have the human reasoning abstraction capability, AI will be able to simulate it, because the natural language applications naturally, we will have AI that exhibits intelligence, exhibits some degree of analysis, abstraction, even creativity, but it won't be a full superset of humans. We see that AI and humans are symbiotic. We'll use AI to help us with tools. I believe that we'll also see immersive environments with AR and VR, definitely working in 20 years, probably beginning to work in 5 to 10 years, with non-intrusive small devices like the glasses, which you can put on and see a combination of what's real and what's synthetic. Quantum computing should begin to work, and that will further revolutionize these AI capabilities and algorithms. I don't think we will be at singularity or AGI, artificial general intelligence, or super intelligence in 20 years, not because I don't think AI will advance. I do believe AI will grow a lot. If we are this circle over here, and then AI is this circle with some intersection, the AI circle will hugely grow over the next 20 years, but it won't be a full superset of the human capabilities. And it's also my hope that humans will grow because we learn to use AI better, and because we improve on our fundamental capabilities in the process. The reason I don't think we can fully get there is there are still too many open scientific problems. We don't know how our brain works. We don't know why we have emotion and self-awareness. We don't know where our creativity comes from. And if we need to deliberately program these, we also don't know how, because AI currently operates on data. So it sure looks like a couple of very big breakthroughs are needed. And it's hard to predict breakthroughs, but in the past 60 years of AI, there's only been one big breakthrough. To suggest there would be multiple 5 or 10 new ones in the next 20 years just seems aggressive to me. And there are many issues about the dangers of AI. We don't have a lot of time to cover this in detail. Concerns about AI's personal data being lost, concerns about security, concerns about fairness, and my general belief is that we do need regulations to prevent very egregious behavior, and they need to be there needs to be deterrent, and bad people who do these bad things when they're caught should be severely punished. That needs to be in place. But I also believe we need to let technologists figure out a way to solve these technology-induced problems. Just like when electricity first came out, it was dangerous. People could get electrocuted, but then we came up with circuit breakers. Just like when internets were first connected to PCs, we got viruses on our PCs, but then we invented antivirus software. There are beginnings of ideas, some of which illustrated here, that are looking like technology solutions might be able to harness the problems created by AI. I'll just give one example. People are very concerned about protection of personal information. Yet, if we don't pool people's information together, we can't really train AI. That is until the idea of federated learning was discovered. It's in an area called privacy computing. The idea of federated learning is, imagine we're all want to be careful about our health data. We don't want everybody to have it, but our hospital already has it. So suppose we create a system, and this is what my hospital, this is your hospital, this is someone else's hospital, and our data resides in the hospital where AI is trained from them, and then all these AI trained in each hospital are pulled together, then this guy never saw any of our data. So if this can be proven to work, then we will be able to have our cake and eat it too, protect our privacy, personal data, and still benefit from the power of AI. So it is my hope that technologists will see a call to action and solve many of these problems caused by technology so that we can enjoy the technologies without the externalities. So that is the end of my talk, and thank you.
Dr. Lee, thank you once again for investing your time recording your keynote for the Swiss Cognitive Global AI community about how AI will transform our world. Great insights that we were certainly more than happy to share today with our community. Thank you for being here with us in this forum. We hope to meet you soon again in person, maybe already in January at the World Economic Forum in Davos. Now, dear audience, let me wrap up our event. We have seen that what a great impact AI will have on the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals and how investments in AI have boomed in the last 9 years. We also learned that AI is not just for data scientists. We also need a business leadership that is data aware. The importance of improvements in NLP, as well as the acceleration achieved in science through the use of AI, was also highlighted. A strong case was also made for investments in open source technology and data. Some of the challenges that were highlighted include the fundamental imbalance in the supply and demand that underpins the AI economy, as well as the dark side of the increasing dependency of computers. The ethical questions through the whole AI development process were also highlighted. Each questions need to be analyzed and addressed to achieve ethical AI. The topic of AI ethics is also important because AI is a mirror of the quality of human values and invites us to a new level of maturity. Finally, we learned the importance of taking a chance of young generation and how this can improve innovation. And now, to your dear audience, it was my pleasure to have you with us today. Great interaction and questions on the chat. Keep them going on and keep continuing the discussion on social media. We want to hear from you, maybe even on stage. Let us know what you have to share with your peers globally. Check out the upcoming events on our website. The registration is not yet open, but we will keep you posted in January. Until then, in a few days, you will receive our event wrap-up, including Dr. Keyfouli's video recording and all the handouts. So keep tuned. And now, On behalf of the Swiss Cognitive team and my co-founder, Andy, I thank you for your time and curiosity for being here today and actively participating in today's event. We are again at a time of the year when we can slow down, take some time to reflect, make adjustments to what we've been doing, or even redirect completely from our original plans. Use this time to whatever you need to, but most of all, to recharge your batteries and to be with your loved ones. This is definitely what we are going to do. Enjoy this beautiful time of the year and cherish very moment of it. We're wishing you and your loved ones a heartwarming festive season with lots of laughter, love, and most of all, health. Take care, and I'm inviting my team to say hello to you. This is us, and we wish you Merry Christmas, festive seasons, and a Happy New Year, and see you all in 2022 and beyond.